Imagine. You wake up in a cold stone cell. The air smells of iron, smoke, and fear. Somewhere beyond the wall, bells toll for dawn, not for prayer, but for judgment. Your breath curls white in the half-light. You touch the wall. Damp. Rough. The chill of it crawls into your bones like a living thing. You think you're a knight of glory, sworn to God? The truth is darker. Your brothers are hunted, your order betrayed, and the treasure, the envy of kings, has vanished into legend. You are a Templar, and your story is about to be erased from history. A rat darts across the floor. The torch outside flickers once, twice, then steadies. You can hear the clink of chains, the cough of a guard, the scrape of metal on stone. Somewhere above, Paris is waking, carts creaking over cobbles, a baker lighting his oven, a church bell echoing through mist. Life goes on, oblivious, while below the streets the last of the Knights Templar waits for dawn and fire. No one knows what happened to the treasure. Not really. Oh, they've written it down in 1,000 guesses. Gold hidden beneath cathedrals, scrolls buried in sealed vaults, ships vanishing into the Atlantic mist. But every story begins the same way, with faith, with blood, and with a secret so powerful kings were willing to kill God's own soldiers to possess it. Close your eyes for a moment. Hear the echo of hooves on Crusader sand. Smell the dust of Jerusalem, the incense of its temples, the sweat and salt of the men who believed themselves chosen. 9 knights, weary and penniless, rode there in 1119. Their names would be etched into history, though history would later try to carve them out again. They swore vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And yet what they found beneath the Temple Mount would make them richer than any crown. But we'll get there. For now, imagine them arriving in that holy city, sunlight blazing off the dome, banners whipping in desert wind. Jerusalem, the prize of heaven, the obsession of earth. The air there was thick with contradiction. Pilgrims praying at dawn, merchants shouting by noon, and by dusk the sound of swords clashing just outside the walls. The Crusades had carved faith into war, and the Holy Land had become a marketplace of salvation, relics for sale, sins redeemed by coin. Into this fever came those 9 men. They were not nobles of fortune but veterans of the First Crusade, men who'd seen too much death to mistake faith for purity. Led by Hugues de Payens, they took an oath before the Patriarch of Jerusalem, to guard the roads for pilgrims, to defend them from thieves and raiders. That was all. No mention of treasure, no hint of conspiracy. Just humble knights of Christ. But humility in those days had a way of attracting power. King Baldwin II granted them quarters on the Temple Mount, the very site of Solomon's ancient temple. And there, beneath the ruins, they began to dig. No one recorded why. Some said they were seeking shelter. Others whispered that they sought something buried since the days of the Ark itself. For 9 years they worked in secret, emerging gaunt and silent, their eyes hollowed by whatever they'd seen beneath the stones. When they surfaced again, they were changed, and the world began to change with them. Word spread of the knights who feared nothing, who rode into battle with the calm of men who knew their souls were already accounted for. Pilgrims said they glowed in combat, that arrows broke against them, that their banner, a red cross on white, carried the wrath of heaven. And soon, the world began to pay for their protection. Land, coin, favor. Donations poured in from every corner of Christendom. From poverty they rose to power faster than any order before or since. But power breeds whispers, and whispers, in time, turn to myth. The first tales spoke of vaults beneath Jerusalem, rooms lined with gold, guarded by stone lions. Then of secret relics carried back to Europe, the cup of Christ, the spear of Longinus, perhaps even fragments of the true cross. Chroniclers dismissed it, of course. Superstition, they said. No man could hold such relics. And yet, everywhere the Templars went, wealth followed. By the mid-13th century, they were bankers to kings. They lent money to monarchs, financed crusades, managed estates. They built castles that rivaled fortresses of the crown. Their network of preceptories stretched from Scotland to Cyprus, and their ships carried goods, gold, and, according to some, things that were never meant to see the sun again. Imagine walking into one of their commanderies. Thick walls, banners rippling in torchlight, the smell of iron and tallow. A hall lined with shields engraved with the Red Cross. At the far end, an altar draped in white. Beneath it, maybe, a trapdoor leading down to a chamber where no outsider ever entered. You can almost hear the clink of keys, the whispered Latin prayers, the soft thud of a chest being closed, sealed with wax bearing the mark of Solomon's temple. The treasure, whatever it was, became less about gold and more about the idea of possession itself. What had they found that gave them such certainty, such fearlessness? Some said it was knowledge. Ancient texts buried since before Christ. Secrets from the builders of the temple, geometry, alchemy, the language of God carved in numbers and stone. Others believed they'd uncovered proof of something heretical, something that could unravel the church itself. Whatever it was, it made them untouchable. For nearly 2 centuries, kings knelt before them. Until one day, a king decided to stand. But we're not there yet. For now, picture the twilight of the 13th century. France, rich and restless. The Templar fortresses rise above the countryside like stone prayers. Inside, knights kneel in silent rows, faces lit by candlelight, chanting the Latin words of their rule, non nobis, domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, but to your name give glory. Outside, peasants whisper about the knights who never die. Mothers tell their children that if you pass a Templar chapel after midnight, you can still hear the sound of gold being weighed. Legends grow like ivy, creeping up the walls of truth until you can't tell which is which. And somewhere, far below Paris, in catacombs carved long before Christ, a single candle burns beside a chest bound in iron. Dust drifts down like ash. The sigil of the Templars, that red cross, is painted on the lid. No one knows who placed it there. No one ever will. That's where the story begins, in the space between fact and faith, where men die for secrets and kings kill for silence. The treasure of the Templars isn't just what they possessed. It's what they knew. And in the centuries that followed, that knowledge would become the most dangerous currency in Europe. You lean back against the wall of your cell. Footsteps approach. The guard's torch flickers through the bars, painting stripes of orange light across the damp floor. They'll come for you soon. You know that. The trials have already begun. Your brothers have confessed to impossible sins, their words torn from them under flame and iron. They've been accused of worshipping idols, of spitting on the cross, of kissing each other's feet. Lies, perhaps. But lies are useful when truth threatens thrones. You whisper a prayer, not for salvation, but for memory. That someone, someday, will remember who you were. The door creaks open. A shadow fills the threshold. It's time. As you rise, the chain around your wrist jingles softly, like coins in an unseen purse. And you realize, even now, even in this cell, the treasure of the Templars is still being counted. Outside, the bells toll again. Dawn. Judgment. And the legend begins to breathe. The sound of chains fades, and the echo of bells dissolves into the wind. Paris blurs away, and the cold cell softens into dust and sunlight. You're still there, standing, but the world has changed around you. The year is no longer 1307. It's 1119, and the air smells of cedar, sweat, and holy dust. You are no longer a prisoner. You are a pilgrim. The sun rises over Jerusalem, hot and white. The city shimmers like a mirage, its domes and towers gleaming through the haze. Bells clang from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Muezzins call from the heights of minarets. The air is thick with faith and fatigue, a mixture that smells of incense and iron. The roads outside the city walls crawl with travelers, barefoot men with wooden crosses, women clutching relics wrapped in cloth, soldiers in mail rusted by salt and sweat. They move like ants toward a city that has already devoured 100,000 souls. You stand among them, just another figure in a world rebuilding itself after the storm of crusade. The first crusade had taken Jerusalem 2 decades earlier, and left it painted in blood. Now, the dust is settling, and the new kingdom of Jerusalem teeters between triumph and chaos. Pilgrims arrive daily from Europe, clutching letters of indulgence and dreams of absolution. Few survive the journey. The road from Jaffa to Jerusalem is a graveyard. Bandits wait in the hills, their knives catching the sunlight like mirrors. Desert winds erase tracks, and when a caravan disappears, the sands close over it in silence. And that is where the story truly begins, with men who looked at this perilous road and decided that someone must guard it. Their leader was Hugues de Payens, a knight from Champagne. He was not the loudest of men, nor the most powerful, but there was something in his eyes, that steady, flint-hard certainty that makes others follow without question. Beside him rode Godfrey de Saint-Omer, and 7 others whose names have blurred with time. 9 knights in total. 9 against the deserts of the East. They arrived at the court of King Baldwin II in Jerusalem, lean, sunburned, their horses thin, their armor patched with rust. They knelt before the king and swore an oath that would bind them forever: poverty, chastity, obedience, and the defense of pilgrims. It was a small promise in a world of grand words. But the king saw something useful in them. Jerusalem's streets were full of armed men without purpose. These knights offered purpose wrapped in piety. He granted them quarters on the Temple Mount, the site where Solomon's temple was said to have stood, where Christ himself had once walked, and where Muslims now spoke of the Prophet's ascent into heaven. The knights took it as a sign. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The world would shorten that to Templars. Their quarters were simple: stone halls open to the wind, a few tapestries for warmth, a stable for their horses, a small chapel where candles guttered against the draught. They slept on straw, ate coarse bread, and patched their own tunics. Their banner was plain, white for purity, with a single red cross sewn by hand. But there was something deeper beneath that austerity. The Temple Mount was no ordinary foundation. Beneath it stretched catacombs and tunnels, remnants of the older world, cisterns, burial chambers, and perhaps ruins of the first temple itself. At night, the knights descended with torches and shovels, vanishing beneath the stones for hours. When they returned, they said little. The Patriarch of Jerusalem recorded their devotion, but even he wondered what occupied them in those depths. Some claimed they sought relics, others that they were mapping the ancient cisterns. The truth was locked behind their silence. Years passed. 9 men became a brotherhood. They patrolled the roads, escorting pilgrims from port to city, fighting off raiders. They became a familiar sight, grim riders in white mantles, moving through the desert with the discipline of monks and the precision of soldiers. Their rule was strict. They spoke only when necessary, ate in silence, fasted often. Their horses were sacred companions, allowed to graze freely even during famine. A knight could not hunt for pleasure or own personal wealth. He was to live and die as Christ's warrior, unflinching, pure, and poor. But poverty in those years was a paradox. The more sincerely the Templars rejected the world, the more the world came to adore them. Their humility was irresistible. Kings and nobles saw in them an opportunity for their own redemption. Gold poured in as donations, estates, vineyards, entire villages offered in exchange for prayers and protection. Within 20 years, they had become the favored sons of the Church. In 1129, at the Council of Troyes, the Templars were officially recognized as a religious military order. The great scholar Bernard of Clairvaux, a man whose words could move armies, wrote their rule. He called them new knights, unlike any before. They wear armor. he said, but their souls are clothed in faith. They seek no reward but the glory of God. His praise made them legends. Imagine that moment, a vast hall filled with bishops and nobles, the air thick with incense and wax. Hugues de Payens kneeling before the council, head bowed, the red cross of his order shining in torchlight. Bernard's voice rising. They fear neither demons nor men, for their bodies are for the battlefield, and their souls for paradise. The audience murmured prayers, but beneath the reverence, something else stirred, awe perhaps, or unease. For these were monks who killed saints with swords. From that day, the Order of the Temple became more than a handful of knights. It became a machine. Recruitment soared. Every fortress, every monastery, every field they acquired fed into a growing web of power that stretched across Christendom. The Templars swore loyalty only to the Pope, not to kings, not to lords. That independence was both their armor and, centuries later, their undoing. But in the beginning, it was strength. Their seal depicted two knights riding a single horse, a symbol of poverty, yes, but also of unity. Two souls sharing one purpose. Every recruit who joined the order relinquished his name, his family, his wealth. In return, he gained immortality in legend. Picture them now, ranks of white-cloaked men assembling in the domed courtyard of a new fortress in Jerusalem. The clang of metal, the murmured Latin prayers, the thud of hooves. The rising sun strikes their helmets like fire. A bell tolls. One by one, they mount their horses, faces hidden behind visors. No banners of kings, no heraldry, only the red cross. From the parapet, Hugues watches them ride out along the road to Jaffa. Dust swirls around their hooves, and within minutes they are gone, swallowed by the heat shimmer. To the pilgrims they protect, they must look like ghosts. And perhaps they are. The Templars grew because the world wanted to believe in them. Europe was weary of sin, hungry for redemption that didn't come from sermons but from steel. A knight who fought for heaven, that was a new kind of holiness. And so, sons of nobles begged to join. Merchants donated ships. Women gave dowries of silver to fund fortresses in the Holy Land. Within a generation, the Templars had become indispensable. Their white mantles were seen from Spain to Syria. They built strongholds on every frontier, each one a fragment of Jerusalem transplanted into foreign soil, square, austere, unyielding. Their architecture became their theology, solid, disciplined, eternal. And yet, beneath the stone, there was always the memory of those first 9 years beneath the Temple Mount. Whatever they found there, whether gold or scripture or something far older, became the pulse of their secrecy. Bernard of Clairvaux once wrote to them, "You are lions in battle and lambs in peace." But others whispered different comparisons, serpents, guardians, keepers of forbidden relics. Their own brothers might not have denied it. They prayed to Christ, yes, but they also guarded something else, something they would not name even under oath. The first recruits told stories in candlelight. Of Hugues returning from the tunnels pale as death. Of symbols carved in stone that glowed faintly when the torches flickered. Of a sealed box carried westward under armed guard, never opened, never spoken of again. Were these fables born of awe, or of guilt? No one knows. But the myth began to take root before the ink on their papal charter had even dried. By the 1130s, pilgrims spoke of miracles along the roads they patrolled, of robbers turning blind, of a Templar's blood healing the sick, of swords that rang with music when drawn in God's name. The Church neither confirmed nor denied these tales. Miracles are good for business. And so the order grew. The poor Knights of Christ were poor no longer. They had become an empire within Christendom, a paradox of humility and grandeur, silence and thunder. But even empires begin as whispers. And this one, born in dust and devotion, would rise until its shadow touched every throne in Europe. The cell returns faintly now, like a ghost of the future hovering behind your eyelids. The sound of chains again, faint far away. the echo of bells. The 2 centuries between 1119 and 1307 collapse like a folded map. You can feel the weight of their story pressing forward, the next turn inevitable. Because once an order is born, something else begins to grow with it. Not just faith, but envy. And that envy will soon come calling. The world tilts again, and time rolls forward like sand through a clenched fist. The smell of the Jerusalem desert fades into the sharper scent of European pine and iron. Somewhere, a bell rings, not for prayer this time, but for commerce. The order has changed. What began as 9 hungry knights has become a continent-wide network of men who own nothing and yet control everything. Across France, England, Portugal, and Spain, the Red Cross now hangs from castle walls and monastery gates. You walk through one of their commanderies. A place that smells of wax, parchment, and horses. Sunlight pours through narrow windows, glinting on shields stacked in the corner. Monks in white mantles move quietly between tasks, some tending the forge, others copying accounts into thick ledgers. It feels both sacred and strangely practical, a monastery welded to a barracks. At the center of the hall stands a long wooden table. Upon it, parchment maps, iron keys, wax seals. A chest sits open, its contents shimmering faintly in the half-light. Not gold, but coins stamped with the cross of the temple. Money from pilgrims. Donations from kings. Ransoms from Saracens. Alms that have multiplied beyond counting. The irony is breathtaking. They vowed poverty, yet their poverty has made them rich. It began innocently enough. Pilgrims who survived the road to the Holy Land needed somewhere safe to leave their possessions. The Templars offered an answer. In London, or Paris, or Venice, a man could deposit his gold with the order and receive a parchment bearing the seal of the temple. He could travel unburdened across seas and deserts, then withdraw the same value, minus a modest fee, at a Templar house in Jerusalem. In essence, they had invented the check. And with it, the foundation of modern banking. The roads that had once been littered with corpses now hummed with commerce under their protection. Their fortresses became not only way stations for warriors but vaults for the wealth of Europe. They stored crowns, deeds, relics, even secrets. A king could trust a Templar more than his own treasurer, for a Templar feared damnation more than death. The order learned quickly that coin was another kind of weapon. With it they built. Picture their castles, stark, geometric, functional. The thick outer walls slant inward like shoulders braced for impact. The towers are square, not round, easier to construct, easier to defend. Inside, the silence is disciplined, filled with the scent of stone and sweat. Each fortress mirrors Jerusalem's Temple Mount, as though every one were a prayer made of limestone. In Spain and Portugal, they fought the Moors, turning frontier hills into lines of fire. In France and England, they became landlords, managing estates and vineyards. Their lands produced wheat, wine, wool, and loyalty. Every transaction fed the order's treasury, and the treasury fed the dream of returning to the Holy Land forever prepared. The Templar network stretched from the Irish coast to the Levant. They owned fleets of ships that sailed under no king's flag. Their symbols carved into docks and chapel stones became a language of power: the twin rider seal, the red cross, the circle enclosing a triangle. Merchants whispered that even the sea obeyed them. You find yourself walking the wharves of La Rochelle. It's dawn. Fog hangs over the masts. A Templar knight oversees the loading of crates, barrels sealed with wax, casks of wine, iron-bound chests. The ship's name is written in Latin: Fides, faith. Its destination, Cyprus, then Acre. The knight signs a ledger with the mark of the cross, and the vessel slips into the mist like a prayer carried by wind. They've become businessmen in armor. But behind the quiet efficiency lies something fierce: the memory of Jerusalem. Every coin is a promise to take back what was lost. Every fortress, every ship, a step toward redemption through conquest. The paradox deepens. They preach humility yet dine with kings. They swear obedience to the Pope yet advise monarchs. They own no possessions yet control the economies of nations. Even their enemies admire them. Muslim chroniclers write of their bravery, calling them the lions of the Franks. In battle, they charge first and retreat last. At Hattin, when the Crusader army is surrounded, it is the Templars who refuse to yield. Their Grand Master dies surrounded by corpses, his blood soaking the desert sand like spilled ink on parchment. But courage cannot balance loss. The Holy Land begins to slip away again, fortress by fortress, relic by relic. And with each retreat, the Templars turn their eyes westward, to their estates in Europe, where the treasure flows more freely than the grace of God. In France, their headquarters on the Rue de la Verrerie becomes a fortress of coin and parchment. The Grand Master's chamber smells of vellum and sealing wax, the air thick with the rustle of documents. The treasury lies beneath the chapel floor, guarded by walls 8 feet thick. Gold coins gleam in candlelight, stacked in chests carved with Latin mottos, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam. The brothers count in silence. Numbers are prayers now. And outside, Paris changes. Merchants prosper. Kings borrow. The same knights who once fought for the Holy Sepulchre now finance wars and build cathedrals. The Red Cross, once a symbol of sacrifice, becomes a guarantee of credit. It is power, pure and quiet, and it makes men uneasy. You can almost hear it, the murmurs of nobles, the sigh of bishops. Why should a monk own more land than a duke? Why should the Pope's soldiers lend money to the Pope himself? Power admired too long begins to curdle into resentment. Still, the Templars press on. Their rule forbids luxury, yet their halls glitter with silver gifts from grateful kings. Their libraries swell with books on law and philosophy. They commission masons to carve symbols, circles, crosses, knots without beginning or end. Perhaps ornament, perhaps code. In the north of France, a child peers through the gates of a Templar preceptory and sees knights at drill, a wall of shields, the synchronized gleam of swords, the low chant of prayer before battle. To him, they look invincible. To his father, they look dangerous. The legend grows heavier with every coin, every rumor. Some whisper that beneath their chapels, the old tunnels of Jerusalem have been rebuilt, secret vaults filled with the relics of the temple. Others claim that the Templars guard a knowledge older than Christianity, a truth that could unmake the Church. The order says nothing. Silence has always been its armor. And yet, even within that silence, cracks begin to form. The younger knights, born in comfort, know little of poverty or pilgrimage. They train, they feast, they manage estates, but the edge of devotion has dulled. The old monks of the East would scarcely recognize them. Still, their banner flies everywhere, and their name carries the weight of fear and fascination. In England, they collect rents for kings. In Portugal, they advise the crown. In the German states, they mediate disputes between princes. Their white mantles move through courts and marketplaces like ghosts of authority. It is said that when a Templar rode through a village, people fell silent. Children stared, mothers crossed themselves. Because behind that calm faceplate was not a man, but an idea, the promise that somewhere, somehow, holiness and discipline could make the world safe. But the world is never safe. A century passes. The Holy Land is lost again. Acre falls. The surviving knights limp back to Europe, weary, wounded, but still wealthy. The kings who once begged them for loans now owe them fortunes. And a debtor king is a dangerous thing. In France, Philip IV, called the fair for his face, not his heart, stares at the balance sheets and feels rage tighten his jaw. He owes the Templars more than his treasury can repay. Their fortress in Paris looms a few streets from his palace. Their coffers are full while his run dry. He begins to dream of excuses. Heresy, corruption, secret rites. The words roll easily off the tongues of envious men. But that is still to come. For now, the order stands at its height, the richest brotherhood in Christendom, masters of ships, land, and gold, united by a vow of poverty they no longer remember how to feel. You walk again through the great hall of the temple in Paris. The candles burn low. The sound of distant bells drifts through the window slits. A young knight kneels before the altar, whispering the old prayer, Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord. Not unto us. Behind him, the treasury hums like a heart too full. He doesn't yet know that every coin in those chests is counting down, not toward wealth, but toward ruin. Outside, the mist thickens. The city breathes. The world waits. And far below, in forgotten vaults, the Red Cross sleeps over sealed boxes that have not been opened for 100 years. Soon enough, they will come looking for them. Soon enough, the bells will toll again. The candles in the Paris commandery flicker, and time folds again. The shadows of the nights lengthen and twist, melting into rows of clerks bent over parchment. Quills scratch. Wax drips. The sound of coins clinking into chests has become the heartbeat of the temple. The warrior monk has turned into something new, a banker in armor. You move quietly among them, down the stone corridor where sunlight pours through narrow windows like bars of gold. At the far end, a chamber hums with a rhythm that no church bell can match, the counting of wealth. You can smell it. Metal and wax, parchment and dust. The scent of empire in miniature. The Templars have done what no one else dared, they have tamed money. Imagine the world then, 1,000 currencies, all mistrusted. Coin clippings, counterfeit stamps, kings debasing their mints to pay for endless wars. A merchant traveling from England to Jerusalem might lose half his fortune to thieves before he even reached the sea. But now, he carries a slip of parchment sealed with a red cross, and every man from London to Acre honors it. The Templars call it a letter of credit. The Church calls it a miracle of trust. The kings call it necessity. Within decades, their system spans Europe. A pilgrim can deposit coin in London, sail to Marseilles, cross the Mediterranean, and draw funds in the Holy Land, all by invoking the seal of the temple. The routes of faith have become the arteries of finance. It begins quietly, a handful of brothers keeping ledgers in Latin shorthand, exchanging deposits between commanderies. But the simplicity hides something revolutionary. For the first time, wealth moves invisibly, not as metal, but as numbers, names, faith. And faith, after all, has always been their business. In Paris, their treasury beneath the temple becomes the safest vault in Christendom. Kings store their jewels there. Nobles hide dowries and inheritance within its walls. Even the Church entrusts its coin to the order that once swore to own nothing. The paradox deepens. They are monks who lend, priests who profit, warriors who write receipts. By the mid-13th century, their ledgers are thicker than any Bible. They record loans to the crowns of France, England, Aragon, and Sicily, the cost of crusades, the ransom of kings, the rebuilding of cathedrals. They do not lend as usurers, for that would damn their souls, but as custodians of holy enterprise. The interest they collect is veiled as expenses, provisions, service fees. The semantics of salvation. In their halls, transactions are whispered as prayers. May this loan serve the glory of God, one knight murmurs as he presses his seal into warm wax. Across from him, a royal envoy nods, relieved. The gold will buy ships, soldiers, time. But gold is never truly lent. It only changes hands, and every coin carries the weight of its return. The Templars have become indispensable. When Pope Innocent III plans a crusade, it is they who hold the purse. When the English crown quarrels with Rome, it is the Templars who mediate the payments. Their clerks move through courts like shadows in white, discreet, incorruptible, and terrifyingly efficient. You can almost hear the rhythm of their counting echoing through the cities of Europe. In London, the temple rises beside the Thames, a round church modeled after the Holy Sepulchre, its floor worn smooth by the knees of lawyers and knights. Beneath it, the treasury vaults hold fortunes greater than any private bank. To the public, the knights remain silent figures at prayer. To monarchs, they are indispensable accountants. A young squire kneels in that church, his breath fogging the air. He has brought a coffer from his lord, filled with silver from a recent campaign. The master of the house opens the book, writes a few neat lines, seals the entry, and smiles faintly. "Your lord's funds are safe in God's hands," he says. The squire leaves lighter, freer, unaware that he has just witnessed the future of the world, credit, trust, abstraction. And still, the brothers ride. Their swords have not rusted entirely. In Spain, they fight the Moors. In the east, they guard the last outposts of Acre. But their wars grow fewer, their ledgers thicker. The sound of prayer now mingles with the shuffle of parchment. At banquets, nobles joke that the Templars are richer than kings. The joke is dangerous, but laughter hides fear. Everyone owes them something. Everyone, including the monarchs who envy them most. When a king dies, his debts to the temple outlive him. When a queen is crowned, her jewels have passed through their vaults. When a crusade fails, it is the Templars who absorb the loss. They have become the spine of Christendom's economy, invisible yet unbreakable. Their seal, once a symbol of faith, now guarantees credit across 3 continents. Ships bearing the cross carry not soldiers but spices, grain, and silk. In their ports, merchants speak half a dozen languages, bargaining under frescoes of saints and martyrs. At night, in the quiet of their chapter houses, the knights kneel in rows, faces lit by candles. They still recite their vow of poverty. But even as the words leave their lips, the walls hum with hidden wealth. Somewhere, in the back of your mind, you hear the faint creak of jealousy again. The king's watch. The bishops whisper. The common people, who once adored them, now mutter of arrogance, of secrets, of pride. Why do they answer only to the Pope? Why do they guard their ledgers as fiercely as relics? Why are their treasuries closed even to the eyes of cardinals? The Templars say nothing. Silence, always their greatest defense, begins to sound like guilt. Picture the Grand Master in Paris. He stands before a table covered in correspondence, letters from Cyprus, Scotland, Portugal. Each sealed with wax, each bearing the same crimson cross. He opens one from Acre, reads it by candlelight, reports of raids, dwindling pilgrims, the loss of another fortress. He sighs. The world they were sworn to protect is shrinking. The Holy Land is gone. Christendom has turned inward. And yet the wealth keeps flowing in, like a tide that refuses to turn. In that silence, something dangerous stirs, the sense that they have outlived their purpose. The knights no longer die in deserts. They die of age, of comfort. Their prayers sound more like accounting than devotion. Some still dream of Jerusalem, but the dream feels distant now, buried under coin. You walk past them in the courtyard. Their armor gleams, but their eyes are tired. They have built an empire of trust, but trust is a fickle god. Soon the kings will test it. In England, Henry III borrows heavily from them to build Westminster. In France, Philip the Fair demands loans for his wars against Flanders. Each crown dips deeper into the temple's vaults, and with each debt, resentment grows sharper. How can these monks command the gold of kings? Courtiers whisper in smoky halls. They are priests, not princes. And somewhere, in the marble quiet of Notre Dame, the echo of those words begins to harden into something colder. Accusation? For now, though, the order still stands unchallenged. The bells of Paris ring over their fortress. Merchants bow as they pass. In the markets, the sight of a Templar seal still brings calm, a promise that the world is stable, that the cross still guards the coin. But the light in their treasury grows warmer, redder, like sunset bleeding across the floor. The brothers below count their coin, unaware that each clink is a heartbeat closer to disaster. Gold, like faith, binds men together. But it also blinds them. And somewhere, deep beneath the temple, the old secrets sleep, waiting. The relics, the ledgers, the whispers of what they found in Jerusalem. The two halves of their power, the visible wealth of kings, and the invisible knowledge of God. Both are about to be tested. The air shifts. You can almost smell smoke in the future. Hear the boots of soldiers on cobblestones. Hear the distant echo of a date that has not yet come, Friday, October 13th. But for now, the bells still ring, and the brothers still pray, counting by candlelight, their lips moving in unison. Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. The prayer of humility that no longer hides the sound of wealth. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, the vaults breathe. And somewhere in the darkness, a king begins to count too. The clink of coins fades until it sounds like distant wind. The walls of the Paris temple dissolve into light and dust, and once again the air tastes of salt, of desert, of something older than faith itself. The noise of Europe recedes behind you. You are back in the city that began it all, Jerusalem. The sunlight here is a blade. It cuts across the limestone walls, across the domes of churches and mosques, across the narrow streets where pilgrims move like a river of cloth and sweat. The air smells of incense, camel dung, and stone warmed too long. The Templars once called this city home, not for its comfort, but for its promise. Every step here is scripture. Every wall hides a story. And beneath those walls, the stories grow darker, deeper, older. Picture the Temple Mount, a vast plateau of ancient stone, where the dome of the rock now gleams gold against the sky. Beneath it lies a labyrinth, tunnels, cisterns, chambers carved long before crusaders or caliphs. The kind of place that keeps secrets not for years, but for millennia. It was here, according to legend, that the first Templars began to dig. Officially, they were quartered near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, in the stables that once supported the ancient temple. The arrangement seemed practical, shelter for horses, proximity to the holy sites. But soon whispers spread that these knights spent their nights not in prayer, but in excavation. No records describe what they were searching for. No witness ever saw what they carried out. Yet something about them changed during those years. They emerged thinner, quieter, eyes shadowed by the kind of knowledge that doesn't let a man sleep. Some chroniclers claim they discovered relics, fragments of the true cross, vials of holy oil, perhaps even the Grail itself. Others say they found scrolls written in languages no priest could decipher. There are hints in their own symbols, too: the equal-armed cross, the twin riders, the circle around the square, geometry whispered to be sacred, echoing the designs of Solomon's own temple. But perhaps it wasn't what they found that mattered. Perhaps it was what they learned. Imagine walking through those tunnels by torchlight. The air is heavy with dust. Each step stirs centuries. You pass arches blackened by time, carvings worn smooth by unseen hands. The ceiling drips. Somewhere above, life goes on, priests chanting, merchants calling, bells and prayers in a dozen tongues. But down here, there is only silence. A knight kneels beside a wall, running his fingers across the stones. He feels something, a seam, a draft, the hollow echo of a chamber beyond. He calls to the others. They pry loose a block, the scrape of metal against stone loud enough to wake the dead. Behind it, darkness. A space sealed for 1,000 years exhales its first breath. Inside, they find steps spiraling down, deeper into the earth. No chronicler records what waited below. Maybe nothing but dust and ghosts. Maybe everything the church has spent centuries hiding. Whatever they carried out, they carried it west. When the order spread to Europe, they built their new commanderies in imitation of the Temple Mount, circular churches like the Holy Sepulchre, crypts beneath every altar. And in each, somewhere unseen, a small chamber walled in stone. Always sealed, never opened. The blueprints of faith, repeated like a code. In London, the round church of the Temple stands as a mirror of Jerusalem. Pilgrims walk its circle unaware that beneath their feet lies a chamber identical to those under the mount. In Paris, the Templar fortress hides a similar room. So does Tomar in Portugal, Leon in France, Rosslyn centuries later in Scotland. The same geometry, the same silence. Coincidence, historians say? Tradition, perhaps. But there are those who believe that beneath each of these chapels sleeps a fragment of something larger, pieces of a single secret scattered across the map, a vault spread like a constellation. Some clues survive in the Order's own writings, cryptic references to the treasures of the temple, and the wisdom beneath. Some are carved into the stones themselves, Hebrew letters tucked into Christian carvings, the face of Baphomet half hidden among saints, a chalice hidden inside a cross. Signs left not to reveal, but to remember. You stand now within the vault of the Paris Temple. The air is damp, the walls slick with age. A single torch burns beside you, throwing shadows that dance like spirits. This vault mirrors the ones in Jerusalem, the same slope of ceiling, the same pattern of stones. But here, centuries later, it holds coin instead of relics. Gold instead of grace. The irony is sharp enough to taste. The Templars began as guardians of pilgrims. They became guardians of secrets. And the line between relic and record blurred. A chest could hold bones or documents, a box could hide scripture or gold. Who would ever know? Imagine if the treasures they found were not objects at all, but ideas, knowledge the Church forbade, truths buried by history. The Temple of Solomon had been built by masons who spoke the language of numbers, who turned faith into architecture. What if the Templars learned that language? What if their vaults held not just gold, but geometry, the key to building heaven on earth? The Order's later designs suggest it. Their castles aligned to celestial patterns. Their chapels constructed with ratios that echoed the stars. Their very rules structured in symbolic numbers. 9 founders, 3 vows, 7 years of service before command. Patterns everywhere. And perhaps that was the real treasure, not a grail or an ark, but the code that bound heaven and earth, God and man. Knowledge powerful enough to unmake empires if misused. That might explain their silence. The years pass. The Templars rise. But some still return to Jerusalem, drawn back as if the city itself calls them. They walk its narrow streets as strangers, visiting the mount with the caution of thieves. They pray, yes, but they also listen, to the wind that hums through the cracks, to the echo beneath their boots. They say that even after Saladin retook the city, the Templars were allowed to leave peacefully. He respected them, perhaps because he too knew the weight of holy ground. Perhaps he understood that some wars end not in blood, but in secrecy. When the Templars finally lose the Holy Land altogether, their absence haunts the city like a ghost that refuses to leave. Pilgrims still whisper of hidden chambers, of monks who walk the tunnels at night, of strange lights flickering beneath the mount. The legends never die, they only change shape. In Europe, the vaults multiply. Beneath Paris, new ones are dug. Beneath Tomar, deeper still. Each a reflection of the first. And with every generation, fewer knights remember what was once buried beneath those stones. They keep the rituals but lose the reason. By the time of the Order's wealthiest years, the secrets of Jerusalem are rumor, an inheritance without explanation. The young brothers recite their prayers, seal their vaults, and tell themselves it is tradition. But in the silence of their chambers, they sometimes dream of sand and darkness, of a stairway descending forever. The treasure of the temple has become twofold, one visible, one hidden. The gold in their coffers glitters in candlelight, the other lies buried in memory. And yet, even now, centuries later, the echoes of those first steps under the mount have not faded. Archaeologists still search, spades in hand, driven by the same fever that gripped those 9 nights. Each new tunnel discovered under Jerusalem is treated like a revelation. Each sealed door whispers a challenge, Open me, if you dare. The Templars never wrote down what they found. Perhaps they couldn't. Perhaps some knowledge is meant only to be carried, from night to night, from vault to vault, until the world forgets the language to speak it. And when the last Grand Master stood in chains in that Paris cell, he may have smiled not because of faith, but because of memory, because somewhere, beneath all the stones of the world, something still waited. The vaults of Jerusalem were not just a place. They were an idea. That truth can be hidden, protected, buried until the world is ready to face it again. Now the candle flickers. The gold walls fade. The desert air turns cold. You hear again the murmur of Europe, the bells, the market cries, the whispers of envy. The vaults of Jerusalem are gone, but their shadow stretches west. The treasure, real or imagined, has taken root in every rumor, every fear. Because once men believe that knowledge can be possessed, they will kill to own it. The stone closes over the tunnel. The last echo fades. And somewhere far away, a king begins to plan. The secrets of Jerusalem are no longer safe underground. Soon they will have to run. The air thickens again, the echo of the vaults sliding back into silence. Dust becomes candle smoke, stone becomes parchment, and the mystery of what was buried beneath Jerusalem begins to take shape in stories. Stories that spread faster than any army, whispered in taverns, cloisters, and royal courts. At first, they were only rumors, faint as breath, that the Templars had unearthed something sacred in the East. But rumor, when it feeds on faith, grows teeth. Within a generation, those whispers had become a mythology that even kings repeated with half fear, half awe. The treasure of the temple, they said, was not gold. It was relics, objects so holy they could bend the will of men, relics that might even tilt the balance between heaven and hell. Picture a cold night in France, somewhere around 1240. In a Templar commandery, the brothers gather in the chapel for vespers. The air smells of candle smoke and iron. Their chant rolls through the stone like distant thunder. But beyond the prayer, something else hums, a vibration beneath the floor, as if the stones themselves remember what sleeps below. A visiting abbot, uneasy, writes later of what he saw. They prayed as men who guard a secret. He's not wrong. By now, stories of what the Templars had found in Jerusalem are everywhere. The most daring claim that they discovered the Holy Grail, the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, the same that caught his blood at the crucifixion. It is said that whoever drinks from it is healed, and whoever possesses it can never be defeated. Some chroniclers describe how the knights hid it within their vaults, swearing that its light burned too bright for mortal eyes. Others insist the Grail was never a cup at all, but a book, a gospel erased from Scripture, a revelation so dangerous it could unmake the church. In northern France, peasants point to the round towers of the Templar fortresses and call them Graal keeps. In Spain, pilgrims swear they've seen knights carrying chalices wrapped in silk. In England, a monk claims he saw a bowl carved from a single emerald, glowing faintly in the dark. The church does not confirm any of it, but neither does it deny. Mystery feeds devotion, and the Grail is only one of the supposed wonders. Others speak of the Ark of the Covenant, taken from beneath the Temple Mount itself. The chest that once held the tablets of Moses, the rod of Aaron, and the manna of heaven. They say the Templars found it buried deep in the tunnels, carried it west under heavy guard, and hid it where no king could reach. In the hills of southern France, villagers tell tales of Templar carts moving at night, covered in black cloth, escorted by riders who never spoke. When asked what they carried, they answered only, "The light of God." Still others whisper that the order possessed the shroud of Christ, a linen bearing the image of a crucified man, so detailed it seemed burned into the fabric by divine fire. Centuries later, such a relic would indeed surface in Turin, its origin unknown. But even then, the rumor of Templar hands never quite left it. To the faithful, these stories were proof of sanctity. To skeptics, they were evidence of sorcery. And perhaps, in their own way, both were right. Because relics, real or imagined, held power not just over bodies, but over minds. To touch what Christ had touched, to hold what heaven had made, was to feel that the boundary between earth and eternity could be crossed. For a church built on mystery, relics were currency, and the Templars were becoming the richest traders of all. You walked through their treasuries. Shelves of silver reliquaries shaped like hands, hearts, towers. Bones sealed in crystal tubes. Thorn fragments labeled in Latin. But not all of it is meant for display. Behind one locked door, beneath the Paris temple, lies a chest different from the rest. No gilded surface, no inscription. Only iron and wax. A single guard watches it at all times. Inside, no one truly knows. An inventory written a century later refers to objects of incomparable sanctity, not to be opened save by command of the Grand Master. Another, more cryptic note mentions relics of the Passion and others of unknown origin. Unknown. That word sits heavy. Maybe the knights themselves weren't certain what they guarded. Maybe faith, once unearthed, no longer looked the same. Picture a Templar priest kneeling before that chest. His hands tremble. He believes what he guards is holy, but some nights, in his prayers, he wonders, what if holiness can corrupt as surely as gold? What if light, too long hidden underground, turns to fire? Outside the vault, Europe hungers for miracles. Pilgrims travel hundreds of miles to touch a saint's tooth, a splinter of the cross. Cathedrals rise from the ground like stone prayers, each one needing relics to draw the faithful, and donations. The Templars provide them. They are the only ones who can claim descent from Jerusalem itself. When they speak of the Holy Land, even kings listen. But beneath the pie's surface, the balance begins to shift. Their relics are no longer mere symbols. They have become instruments of authority. A king's crown might earn obedience. A Templar's relic could command belief. And belief, when it begins to answer to men instead of heaven, becomes something dangerous. The Church notices. Quietly. Warily. Bishops write letters asking the Grand Master to disclose the contents of certain vaults. The replies are polite, evasive, final. All relics are secure in the hands of God's servants. Nothing more. Whispers return, this time darker. That the Templars no longer worship Christ, but the relics themselves. That their midnight rituals involve a severed head said to speak prophecies. That their chapels contain statues with hollow eyes, idols of an ancient god older than the cross. The name Baphomet begins to appear in margins, half lost between prayer and accusation. No one can prove it. Yet the fear spreads, because relics are like fire. Everyone wants their warmth, but no one trusts the one who holds them. Imagine now a winter evening in a French monastery. A group of monks gather by the fire. One says he saw a Templar convoy pass before dawn, horses laden, banners unmarked. Another swears that on moonless nights, the brothers hold processions underground, carrying something that glows through the cloth that covers it. The eldest monk sighs. If it is holy, he says, why do they hide it? No one answers. Because holiness, perhaps, is not what it once was. The more the Templars guard, the more they seem guarded themselves. They stop explaining. They stop justifying. Their faith becomes a fortress, unquestioned, impregnable, and increasingly isolated. The relics, whether real or myth, have changed them. When the last Crusader fortress falls and Jerusalem is lost for good, many expect the Templars to fade away. Instead, they grow stronger. Their relics give them legitimacy no army could. The city may be gone, they say, but the temple lives within us. And in a way it does. The architecture of their chapels mirrors the Holy Sepulchre. Their rituals echo the ancient rites of Jerusalem. Even their burial customs reflect the old vaults, knights laid to rest with crossed legs, arms folded, as if still guarding something in death. Each relic, each ritual, each secret, another layer of armor against the world. But armor, once too heavy, begins to sink the wearer. The people who once saw them as saints now see shadows. They ask, why should men of God hide their treasures? Why build vaults when heaven needs no locks? Why hoard light underground? In Paris, the question begins to take shape in the mind of a single man, a king drowning in debt, watching the wealth of the temple grow untouchable. Philip the Fair, fair in face, iron in heart. He asks himself, what if those relics were not holy at all? What if they were heresy made solid? What if seizing them could cleanse both the church and his empty treasury? No answer comes, but ambition rarely needs one. And so, the relics that once made the Templars untouchable will soon make them targets. Their secrecy will become suspicion. Their treasures, evidence. Their faith, crime. You can almost see it, the candlelight glinting off a reliquary, the gold reflected in the eyes of a king. The line between veneration and envy has vanished. The relics beyond imagination have done their work. They have drawn the gaze of every man who believes heaven can be owned. Somewhere in the dark, the old vaults of Jerusalem shudder, as if remembering. Above them, the future begins to move, quietly, inevitably, toward fire. The treasure of faith has become the seed of ruin. And the world, once dazzled by holiness, is about to open its eyes. The candlelight lingers for a moment on the curve of a chalice, on the edge of a silver reliquary. Then the light withdraws. The relics sink back into darkness, and time itself seems to pause, holding its breath before the plunge. The hum of prayer, the echo of hooves, the faint metallic perfume of coin, all fade. In their place comes something quieter, heavier, the weight of disappearance. The treasure of the temple was never meant to be seen. Not the gold, not the relics, not even the knowledge. It lived beneath the surface of things, under churches, under cities, under the skin of history itself. And like all things hidden, it began to call to those who would try to find it. By the late 13th century, the Templars' fortune had become a legend even in their own lifetimes. Kings whispered about it in their palaces, merchants speculated in taverns, peasants swore that the knights' white mantles were lined with gold thread. The truth was both simpler and stranger. The Templars themselves no longer knew how much they possessed. Their records were scattered across 1,000 commanderies. Their wealth was measured not just in coin, but in land, ships, and promises. But the real mystery wasn't what they had, it was where they kept it. When the Holy Land was lost for the last time, something vanished with it. A convoy of Templar ships left Acre just before the fall. Galleys loaded with crates marked only by the Red Cross. They sailed west into the haze of the Mediterranean. Some reached Cyprus. Others, perhaps, did not stop. The inventories of the order record their departure but not their arrival. After that, silence. It said the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, knew only fragments of the truth, that even he could not trace every vault, every hidden hoard scattered across Christendom. Each region guarded its own reserve, sealed and secret even from the others. In times of danger, those chests could vanish overnight, carried by brothers sworn to silence, resurfacing months later in another country, another fortress. It was a design born from fear and genius. No single betrayal could destroy the whole. Picture the twilight of the 1290s. The Templar fleet at La Rochelle, dozens of ships rocking in the harbor, their sails furled, their hulls heavy with unseen cargo. The sun sinks over the Atlantic, gilding the water like molten metal. On the quay, a handful of knights oversee the loading. No banners, no fanfare, only the sound of ropes and the low creak of wood. Crates sealed in pitch. Casks disguised as wine. Scrolls wrapped in waxed linen. A few coins spill from a split chest, gleaming like eyes in the torchlight before being quickly scooped back into shadow. The wind shifts westward. Orders are whispered, not shouted. And when dawn comes, the ships are gone. No manifest. No witnesses. Just the empty tide. For centuries, their fate will haunt historians and dreamers alike. Did they reach Scotland, as some believe, to hide among the sympathies of a king at odds with Rome? Did they sail farther still, to Portugal, where the order was reborn under another name, the Order of Christ? Or did they cross the open ocean itself, centuries before Columbus, their treasure buried in lands yet unnamed? Every generation invents its own answer. In Brittany, old fishermen claim to have seen Templar sails vanish into fog that never lifted. In Spain, monks whisper of sealed vaults beneath abandoned preceptories, too sacred, or too cursed, to open. In the Pyrenees, shepherds speak of red crosses carved into cliff walls, marking where wagons once passed. And in Paris, long after the order's fall, masons repairing the foundations of the old temples swear they heard hollows beneath the stones, empty spaces that echoed like lungs. The hidden hoard was never just treasure. It was a question: what could drive men who fear neither death nor damnation to bury everything they owned? Maybe they knew what was coming, because by the first years of the 14th century, the world had turned against them. The kings who once knelt for loans now sneered at their debt. The Church, grown uneasy with their autonomy, began to frown at their secrecy. Philip the Fair of France, the most powerful monarch in Europe, owed them a fortune he could never repay. And nothing unsettles a ruler quite like the sight of men who serve no throne but God. So the king began to weave his net. Quietly at first. Spies in monasteries, whispers among merchants, letters to the Pope heavy with accusation. Heresy. Idolatry. Sodomy. Witchcraft. The words multiplied like rot in the dark. But before Philip could strike, he had to answer one question of his own. Where was the treasure? If he could seize it, his debts would vanish, and the Templars' power with them. But even his informants could tell him nothing. The vaults of Paris were empty. The accounts showed transfers, funds moved to secure houses, to unknown repositories. The paper trail dissolved into silence. It was as if the order had already erased itself. Perhaps that was their final act of faith, to hide everything so completely that even their enemies would be chasing ghosts. You walk now through the corridors of the Paris Temple on the eve of their arrest. The torches burn low. Somewhere above, bells toll midnight. In the treasury chamber, a handful of brothers stand over an open chest. Their faces are calm. They have done this before. One by one, they seal the ledgers, lock the coffers, and place the keys into a small iron box. A young knight carries it away through a side door that leads down into the crypt. No one speaks. When the door closes, the sound it makes is final, like the lid of a tomb. And yet, even as the flames of persecution are kindled, something moves beneath the surface of Europe, a network of secret couriers, hidden ports, vaults within vaults. Wherever a Templar fortress falls, the treasure is already gone. When Philip's men stormed the temple in Paris at dawn on Friday, October 13, 1307, they find ledgers, relics, and a few empty chests. The king's officers rage. They overturn stones, pry open floors, tear apart the chapel walls. Nothing. Some whisper that on the night before, wagons rolled out of the city under cover of darkness, guarded by silent riders who disappeared into the forest road toward the sea. From that moment, the legend of the hidden hoard is born, not in the hands of the Templars, but in the mouths of those who hunted them. It spreads faster than fire. In every country, people claim the treasure passed through their lands. In Portugal, peasants dig by moonlight near Tomar, swearing they can hear metal clinking beneath the soil. In England, rumors swirl that part of it lies beneath the Temple Church, guarded by carved stone knights who will awaken if disturbed. Centuries later, explorers will search islands, mountains, and catacombs, convinced the Templar gold still gleams somewhere beyond reach. Oak Island, Rennes-le-Château, Sinai, even Nova Scotia, the names change, but the hunger stays the same. And maybe that's the real hoard, the human need to believe that faith, once buried, can still glitter in the dark. Because if the treasure was truly just gold, time would have found it. But if it was something else, knowledge, relics, proof, then it was never meant to be unearthed. Perhaps the Templars understood that the greatest way to preserve a secret is not to guard it, but to let it vanish. A mystery protected by its own impossibility. So the ships sail on in imagination, forever at the horizon. The wagons rumble endlessly down the forest road. The vaults beneath the temple remain sealed, their contents as silent as the men who buried them. The world will keep digging. You stand now at the edge of the harbor at La Rochelle. The night air smells of salt and tar. The water glows faintly in the moonlight. For a heartbeat, you think you see movement, a sail far out, ghostly pale against the dark sea. Then it's gone. The tide rolls in, erasing every footprint on the sand. Somewhere behind you, in the city that will soon turn on them, the bells begin to ring. The order is ending. The treasure has already escaped. But its shadow remains, a map drawn in rumor, a riddle carved into stone, leading not to gold, but to the restless imagination of every age that follows. And in that sense, the Templars' hoard was never lost at all. It simply changed form, hiding itself in story, waiting for the next believer to go searching. The sea air fades into the smell of smoke. The waves are gone. In their place rises the echo of bells, slow, relentless, tolling across the rooftops of Paris. The year is 1307. The dawn is pale, bruised by mist. And the greatest brotherhood of knights in Christendom is about to vanish. It begins quietly. Always quietly. Before the sunrise on Friday, October 13th, the streets are already crawling with men. They move like shadows, cloaked, armed, silent. Soldiers loyal not to the Pope, but to the King of France. Orders sealed in wax rest in their hands, each stamped with the royal fleur-de-lis. The King's command is absolute: arrest every Templar. Seize every record. Confiscate every treasure. Philip the Fair stands at the window of his palace, watching the fog lift. He is young still, his face beautiful and cold. A man who believes in control, of nations, of faith, of fate. For years he has envied the wealth that lay just beyond his grasp, locked in the Templars' vaults. And now, at last, he has found the excuse to take it. Heresy. It's a word that can burn through stone. When the king first whispered it into the Pope's ear, even Clement hesitated. The Church owed the Templars too much. Their order was sacred, their service beyond question. But debt is a subtle poison. And when Philip reminded the Pope that the Templars answered to no throne but Rome, suspicion bloomed like rot in a wound. So on that Friday morning, while the city still sleeps, the king's soldiers move. At the temple in Paris, the massive fortress that has stood untouched for nearly 2 centuries, the brothers wake to the sound of boots and iron. The door bursts open. "By order of the king!" The words strike like hammers. The knights rise, confused, half-dressed, the air thick with disbelief. No one resists at first. How could they? They are soldiers of Christ, loyal to church and crown alike. To be accused by either seems unthinkable. But the accusations come fast, sharp, and absurd. Idol worship, secret rites, blasphemy, sodomy, the kiss of betrayal. The list reads like the fevered dreams of an inquisitor. One of the brothers, an old man, his hair white as ash, laughs when they accuse him of spitting on the cross. "We kiss it, fools," he says. "We die for it." They drag him away. By noon, every Templar in France is in chains. Across the land, the same scene unfolds: doors broken, torches flaring, monks turned prisoners. In the days that follow, the arrests spread through Europe like fire leaping from roof to roof. But it's here, in Paris, that the story blackens. Within the tower of the temple, interrogation begins. The king's men call it confession. The knights call it what it is: torture. The sound of it haunts the corridors, iron striking flesh, ropes groaning, screams swallowed by stone. At first, the brothers resist. They recite prayers through broken teeth, they cling to the rule, to their silence. But pain has a way of bending even the strongest faith. Under flame and water, under starvation and mockery, the words begin to slip. Yes, one gasps, we denied Christ. Yes, another moans, we kissed the head. But even as the confessions pile up, something in their tone unsettles the inquisitors. They sound rehearsed, hollow, mechanical, as if the truth has become irrelevant. Philip doesn't care. Truth is not what he wants. He wants proof. The church convenes commissions. The king parades the confessions before them. And yet, when the Pope's own envoys arrive to question the knights, the truth fractures again. The same men who confessed under torture now recant in calm voices. We lied, they say. We were forced. The recorders hesitate. The king's scribes do not. Ink and blood make a similar stain. Outside the city walls, the people murmur. For 2 centuries the Templars had been untouchable, their white mantles symbols of purity. To see them dragged through the streets in chains feels like watching saints unmasked as demons. And yet, no one protests. Fear has its own theology. Meanwhile, the vaults of the temple are opened. The king's officers pry at every lock, smash every chest. What they find is disappointing. A few coins, ledgers, relics, no gold, no grail, no treasure to justify the spectacle. The hidden hoard, if it ever existed, is gone. The king's rage grows colder, more dangerous. He doubles the accusations. Now the Templars are not just heretics, but devil worshippers. The name Baphomet appears again, scrawled in reports, a phantom to fill the empty vaults. It works. The public begins to believe. The trials stretch on for years. Dozens die in cells. Some go mad. Others, broken, are released to monasteries, their vows stripped away like armor. And yet, a core of defiance remains. The Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, refuses to bend. He is an old man now, his beard long, his back bent, his hands scarred from the rack. They say that even in chains he stands taller than his accusers. When asked to confess, he only smiles. If I have betrayed God, he says, may he judge me. Not you. For 7 years they keep him imprisoned. For 7 years, he watches his brothers die. And through it all, he says nothing of the treasure. Nothing of the vaults. Nothing that might give the king what he wants. It is as if silence itself has become his final prayer. In the spring of 1314, they bring him out to die. The city gathers on the Isle de la Cite, where the Seine curls like a silver blade. The scaffold rises against the sky. De Molay is led up the steps between 2 other high-ranking brothers. The air smells of smoke and rain. A clerk reads the charges one last time: heresy, idolatry, blasphemy, and the hoarding of forbidden relics. The crowd mutters. Then the Grand Master raises his voice, thin, hoarse, but steady enough to carry over the water. Lies, he says. All lies. We were innocent. Our only sin was obedience. He turns toward the Cathedral of Notre Dame, its towers black against the sky, and lifts his bound hands. God knows who has wronged us, he cries, and within the year he shall summon those who judge us to his own judgment. The executioner hesitates. Philip's envoy nods. The flames rise. They say the wind shifted that night, carrying the smoke straight toward the royal palace. They say the people fell silent, watching the old man burn without a sound of fear. They say that when the ropes broke and his body collapsed into ash, a flock of crows took flight from the cathedral roof, circling the sky like omens. Within the year, the Pope is dead. Then the king. And the legend of the Templars begins again, not in glory, but in fire. After the flames die down, the ashes scatter into the river. The crowd disperses. But in the silence that follows, a thought lingers. If the treasure was gone before the arrests, then somewhere in the world the order still breathes. A knight escaped here, a ship vanished there, a vault never found. The Templars are gone, and yet not gone. Their cross erased, but not forgotten. And so begins the second life of their story, not as history, but as haunting. The night closes around the ashes, the smoke turning to mist over the river. The bells of Notre Dame toll once more, slow, deep, as if tolling not for death but for memory. The temple has fallen, but its shadow is only growing longer. Because every time men dig for gold, they will find the Templars waiting. Every time kings fear what cannot be controlled, they will hear those bells. And every time faith burns too brightly, somewhere, in the silence beneath the world, the Red Cross will stir again. The order is gone. But the question remains. Where did they go? And what did they take with them? The smoke from the pyre drifts east along the Seine, then thins, fades, and becomes the breath of the sea. The sound of the river folds into the murmur of waves against stone. Paris dissolves, and the world turns once more toward the coast, the gray edge where legend begins to move again. La Rochelle. A harbor of mists and murmurs, where the smell of salt clings to the stones and gulls circle endlessly over empty masts. In the days after the arrests, it is said that the city woke to silence. The Templar fortress on the hill was deserted. The docks where their ships once stood creaked softly in the tide, ropes swaying, barrels rolling, sails slack. No one saw them go. Or rather, no one admits they did. But there are always witnesses who speak when it's too late. A fisherman claims he saw lanterns moving on the water the night before the king's order arrived. Another swears he heard oars striking quietly, rhythmically, as if an entire fleet was rowing in darkness. A child says he dreamed of white sails glowing under the moon. And by dawn, the harbor was empty. No bodies, no wrecks. Only the imprint of keels in the sand, the ghost shapes of hulls that had slipped into legend overnight. The king's men arrived days later, their banners sharp against the wind. They demand to see the Templar fleet. Dozens of galleys and cogs that should have been anchored here. The harbor master only shakes his head. Gone, sire. Gone before the dawn. Gone where? That question will outlive the king himself. Because those ships, those silent, nameless vessels, were more than transport. They were vaults of wood and canvas, built to carry the weight of the temple's wealth, its records, its relics, its very memory. Some say the fleet sailed north, toward England or Scotland. That the Templars sought refuge with Robert the Bruce, the excommunicated king who had little love for Rome. They imagined the ships beached on fog-bound coasts, their cargo unloaded beneath ruined abbeys. There, the knights would have melted into local legend, fighting at Bannockburn, carving strange symbols into chapel stones, guarding their secret line in plain sight. Others claimed the fleet turned south, toward Portugal. That the knights there simply changed their name, becoming the Order of Christ, serving the same God under a different flag. Centuries later, it would be ships bearing that very cross that sailed west under Prince Henry the Navigator, exploring the world as if finishing the voyage that began at La Rochelle. And then there are the wilder tales, the ones whispered by sailors who like their ghosts with salt on them. That the fleet sailed beyond the known world, into a storm that never ended. That it reached a new shore across an unknown ocean, long before any map was drawn. That somewhere, far beyond the horizon, the Templars built one last refuge, a monastery carved into cliffs, its vaults filled with the relics of Jerusalem and the secrets of the Temple Mount. A myth, perhaps. But myths are only history with the names rubbed off. Imagine it. The ships gliding west under a moon that looks like a coin, their sails catching the wind like wings. The brothers on deck stand silent, watching the French coast disappear. Behind them, Europe burns with suspicion and greed. Ahead, nothing but mist. One of them, perhaps the last surviving navigator of Acre, presses a sealed chest to his chest, whispering a prayer. Protect what must be hidden. Let those who seek find only sand. He ties the chest shut, lays it in the hold, and disappears below deck. The fleet sails into legend. And the king, for all his spies and soldiers, finds nothing. His men search every port, every monastery, every river mouth. They dig through the ashes of the temple, tear up floors, interrogate priests. No gold, no relics, no ledgers. The very wealth that justified his purge has slipped through his hands like water. It's said that in his final years, Philip the Fair kept a map of France on his wall, each Templar property marked with red ink. He would stand before it for hours, silent, staring west. When he died, the map vanished too. But the rumors did not. Centuries later, when the fortress at La Rochelle crumbled into ruins, workmen digging beneath its foundations found the remains of a dry dock, vast enough to hold ships twice the size of any the king had known. Along the walls, faint carvings of crosses and circles. On one stone, a single inscription. In silence we sail. Perhaps the fleet never left at all. Perhaps it was hidden in underground caverns, dismantled plank by plank, its cargo walled away in secret tunnels that still run beneath the town. There are divers who swear that, on clear days, you can see the shapes of timbers just beyond the reefs, as if the past itself lies sleeping beneath the tide. Wherever they went, the ships took more than treasure. They took the last truth of the Templars. And in their wake, they left only questions. Who ordered their departure? Was it the Grand Master himself, foreseeing the arrests? Or was it a younger brother, acting on a plan so secret even de Molay could not be told? And what did they carry? Gold, yes, perhaps enough to rebuild the temple 10 times over. But also relics, books, maps. Some say they bore the original rule of the order, written in Depayon's own hand. Others believe they carried the relics discovered under Jerusalem, objects too sacred, or too dangerous, to ever fall into mortal hands. If that is true, then the fleet was not escaping France. It was escaping history. The ocean becomes the new vault. The waves, the walls. The stars, the only witnesses. When the Inquisition demanded the Pope investigate the missing ships, he issued a letter, now lost, but fragments survive. In it he wrote, "The treasures of the temple have passed beyond our sight. If they be in heaven or in hell, only God knows." And perhaps that is where the story should end. But stories that end in disappearance never really end. They echo. Sailors in later centuries will tell of ghostly galleons crossing the Bay of Biscay under blood-red moons. Fishermen will find coins on the shore stamped with a cross that matches no known mint. In Scotland, masons will carve symbols into chapels that seem older than the nation itself. Each fragment, each rumor, is a thread back to those vanished sails. You can almost hear them now, the creak of rope, the sigh of timber, the distant hymn of men who believed they were carrying God's will into the unknown. The sound rises and falls like the tide, fading with the wind. The fire in Paris is out. The king is dust. But the fleet still sails, somewhere beyond reach. The sea keeps its secrets better than stone ever could. And in the hush before dawn, when the tide draws back from La Rochelle and the gulls cry over the empty harbor, you might almost imagine you see them, white sails, a line of shadows against the horizon, gliding west toward a horizon that never ends. The Templars are gone. The treasure is gone. But their silence remains. It rolls with the tide, whispering, not lost, only hidden. The tide pulls back from La Rochelle until all that remains is the hush of wind against water. That hush drifts inland, crossing fields and rivers, until it becomes the sigh of a city at night. The sea salt fades into smoke and tallow. The sound of waves changes into the distant pulse of bells. Paris again, older now, heavier with secrets. The city doesn't sleep, it murmurs. Carts roll on cobblestones, shutters creak, cats prowl across rooftops slick with rain. Somewhere a drunk laughs, somewhere a priest coughs through his prayers. But below all that, the real Paris breathes in darkness. A second city carved from limestone, a maze of tunnels and vaults that stretch beneath the streets like veins beneath skin. Down there, the air is cool and still. Water drips. The walls sweat. Candles burn with short, blue flames. And in that buried quiet, the memory of the temple still lingers. When the king's men razed the Templar fortress after the trials, they built over its bones. Stone by stone, the tower of the temple vanished, its moat filled, its walls quarried for other buildings. The surface forgot. But Paris has layers, and what is buried is never truly gone. A century later, masons working on new cellars found passages that weren't on any plan. Corridors lined with carved crosses, doors bricked up long ago. They said the air smelled of iron and incense, as if the place still remembered the prayers of armored men. The workers told each other to stay out after dark. "The monks walk here still," one said, crossing himself. "You can hear their spurs." Scholars dismissed the tales, of course. But in the hush of those catacombs, where even a whisper seems to travel for miles, belief comes easily. Imagine walking there with a torch. The light wavers across graffiti left by centuries, dates, initials, skulls, the Latin of forgotten students. Then, suddenly, another mark. A red cross, faint but deliberate, painted high where no one would bother to reach unless they meant to. You lift the torch closer. Beneath it, a circle enclosing a triangle. The old geometry of the temple. Was it a prank? A coincidence? Or the echo of a sign passed from hand to hand, decade to decade, guiding those who still remembered? There are stories, always whispered, never written, of secret chambers beneath Paris where the last Templars hid the fragments of their order. Places where refugees from the purge gathered in candlelight, swore new oaths, and kept watch over chests brought from the west. Chests said to hold not gold, but documents, maps, relic lists, the true rule of the order. Some call them the guardians of the veil, others simply the keepers. Whether they existed or not, the rumor of them changes the city. Every tunnel becomes suspect. Every sealed door looks like a confession. In the 18th century, when the catacombs were expanded to hold the bones of millions, the workers reported finding older passages beneath the ossuaries, narrow shafts leading down into deeper blackness. They heard the clatter of loose stones, the faint ring of metal, as if someone below was still at work. A foreman who went to investigate never returned. When they sealed the passage, one of the laborers carved into the wall, "Templarii hic sunt." The Templars are here. No one ever proved it wrong. The echoes of the temple also linger above ground. In the Marais, on quiet nights, residents claim to hear the ringing of unseen bells, low and steady, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. In the ruins of old cellars, explorers find crosses scratched into plaster too new to be medieval. And beneath the modern streets named Rue du Temple and Rue Vieille du Temple, ground-penetrating surveys show voids, rooms that appear and vanish in the data like breaths. Maybe just sinkholes. Maybe not. Legends say that before his arrest, Jacques de Molay ordered the most sacred relics and ledgers moved from the Paris fortress into the catacombs. Only a handful of brothers knew the route. They carried torches through the night, pushing wagons loaded with iron-bound chests, chanting softly to keep their courage. When they reached the deepest vault, they sealed it with a single block of limestone, its surface polished smooth, no markings except one small cross cut into the corner. Then they walked back to the surface, extinguished their torches, and vanished into history. If the story is true, then the treasure of the temple still lies somewhere under the city, entombed not by time, but by intent. It's an idea too intoxicating to die. In the 1600s, a Jesuit scholar named Marin Leclerc claimed to have found fragments of an old Templar map. It showed a pattern of lines radiating from the site of the destroyed fortress toward various churches, the Madeleine, Saint Mary, Saint Jacques la Boucherie. He believed the lines marked underground tunnels connecting the sacred sites. He spent the rest of his life searching for the junction point, convinced it was a hidden chapel where the Templars had preserved their relics. He never found it. But when his apartment was cleared after his death, the floorboards hid a diary. The last entry read, "I heard the bells again tonight. Closer this time." Even the revolution couldn't shake the legend. When mobs stormed the Bastille, they also dug at the ruins of the old temple, looking for the fabled gold of the monks. They found nothing, only bones and brick. Still, the myth endured. 2 centuries later, during the construction of the metro, workers again uncovered strange carvings beneath the city: crosses, swords, circles interlaced with triangles. The engineers ordered them documented and sealed. Officially, they were medieval mason marks. Unofficially, they were reminders that the city beneath the city still had its own guardians. Today, the modern catacombs stretch for miles, lined with the skulls of 6 million Parisians. Tourists walk their late corridors, whispering to one another, pretending not to feel the cold breath that rises from the deeper levels, the parts that aren't on any map. Down there, in the unmapped dark, the air grows warmer, not colder. There are no bones, only bare stone and the faint scent of salt. Some explorers say they've seen walls too smooth to be natural, sealed doors set at perfect right angles, as if a fortress sleeps beneath the cemetery. They call it superstition. But even they admit that the acoustics are strange. Stand still and you can hear what sounds like distant chanting, echoing through rock. A trick of sound, perhaps. Or memory itself repeating its last prayer. If you listen long enough, you might hear the words, Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord. The same vow that once rose from the halls of the temple, now drifting like smoke through stone. Above, Paris goes on, bright, restless, unaware. Lovers walk the bridges. Cafes spill light onto wet streets. Musicians play under the arches of the Pont Neuf. No one thinks about the city beneath their feet, the one that still keeps secrets, older than the skyline. But every so often, when the wind shifts just right, the bells of Notre Dame catch the air and ring in such a way that they seem to come from underground. For a heartbeat, all of Paris listens. Then the sound fades, swallowed by the hum of traffic, the chatter of evening. The moment passes. Yet the echo remains. Because beneath Paris, history never dies. It only waits. And somewhere, in a chamber no map can show, a single candle may still burn beside a chest bound in iron, the red cross etched faintly into its lid. Dust lies thick, centuries deep. A breath of air stirs, and the flame trembles, as if something in the dark has just moved. The city above sleeps. The one below dreams. And between them, the echo of the temple continues, steady as a heartbeat under stone. The tunnels beneath Paris fade behind you like the fading of a dream, the candlelight, the carved cross, the echo of distant prayers dissolving into mist. The stones give way to soil, the soil to sea spray once more. The air grows colder, sharper, filled with the scent of pine and rain. The wind whispers in a language older than France. You are moving north now, across gray waters, through storm and legend, toward the last refuge of the temple. The ships that vanished from La Rochelle did not all sail west into mystery. Some, they say, turned north, their sails torn but steady, their prows cutting through freezing waves toward the ragged coast of Scotland. It was a dangerous choice. Excommunication hung over its king, the land was fractured by war, and winter rode the sea like a ghost. Yet danger had always been their native element. The chronicles are silent, the church records erased, but fragments remain in rumor and stone. In 1307, Scotland was a country in rebellion, its king, Robert the Bruce, outlawed by the Pope for killing a rival in a church. Rome had turned its back on him. France was his enemy. He owed no loyalty to the powers that had destroyed the Templars. And so, when the white-sailed ships appeared out of the fog, the Scottish coast did not resist. Imagine that night. The wind howls through the glens. The surf claws at black cliffs. In the harbor of Mull, or perhaps Argyle, no one can say for certain. Torches flicker on the shore. Fishermen cross themselves, whispering prayers. The sea vomits up ghostly shapes, galleys scarred by battle, their hulls bearing the faded cross of the temple. Men step ashore, gaunt, silent, faces hollowed by exile. Knights once sworn to God, now sworn only to survival. They bring with them chests bound in iron, too heavy for relics, too sacred for coin. The locals say the knights unload them under cover of night, carry them inland on carts covered in tarpaulin, and vanish into the highlands. In the morning, the beach is empty except for wheel tracks leading into the mist. No one ever sees them again. Yet, in the years that follow, strange things begin to appear across Scotland, symbols carved into stones, circles and crosses where no mason remembers placing them. In Rosslyn Glen, near Edinburgh, a small chapel rises a century later whose designs defy explanation. Knights in armor carved beside angels, Hebrew letters woven into Christian prayers, stars and vines and serpents entwined in a language of geometry. Its crypt, locals say, feels older than the walls above it, as if it remembers something buried there long before the chapel was built. Some whisper that Rosslyn was raised by descendants of those exiled knights, the last guardians of the treasure of the temple. Others say the treasure itself lies sealed beneath its altar, guarded by stone effigies of men who never quite look dead. No proof, of course. But proof has never been what keeps a legend alive. In truth, Scotland was the only kingdom in Europe where the Templars could have survived openly, even briefly. The Pope's edict of suppression never reached its full weight there. His authority ended at the border. Robert the Bruce, excommunicated and defiant, had no reason to enforce it. He needed men of discipline, strategy, and faith. The Templars needed protection. It is easy to imagine the bargain: sanctuary for service. When the English invaded in 1314, the same year Jacques de Molay burned in Paris, Bruce faced them at Bannockburn, a battle that would decide his nation's fate. Chronicles tell of strange warriors fighting among the Scots that day, tall men in white surcoats marked with red crosses, silent and relentless. Their charge broke the English line. By evening, the invaders were routed, and Scotland was free. History records them simply as mystic knights, who appeared and vanished with the mist. The Church, uncomfortable with miracles of the wrong kind, declined to investigate. After that, the Templars disappear again. Not as martyrs this time, but as roots, spreading quietly through Scottish soil. Some joined existing orders. Others took new names. The Order of the Temple became, in whispers and lineage, the Order of Christ, the Order of St. John, the guilds of masons and builders. Their vows changed shape, but their symbols remained the same. In the Highlands, clans adopted emblems suspiciously similar to the Red Cross. In the border towns, masons began carving interlocking circles and the twin riders into keystones and arches. When asked, they called it decoration. But those who studied their work knew better: geometry as devotion, secrecy as survival. And in Rosslyn Chapel, centuries later, someone carved an angel playing bagpipes, another holding a sprig of maize, a plant unknown in Europe before Columbus. A hint, perhaps, that the Templar ships that sailed west had indeed found another shore, and that their brothers in Scotland kept the secret alive. The relics, if they survived, were never shown again. Some say they were divided, one piece for each branch of the exiled order. A grail hidden in the north, a shroud in the south, a chest of documents sealed beneath the chapel floor. Others claim that Bruce ordered everything destroyed, fearing the church would use it as pretext for another crusade against his crown. But destruction is never total. Secrets survive in fragments. In the centuries that follow, the Red Cross fades from battlefields but reappears in architecture, in ritual, in whispered greetings between stonemasons. The Templar ideal, brotherhood, secrecy, mastery of stone and star, lives on in the guilds that will one day call themselves Freemasons. If that lineage is real or imagined hardly matters. The symbols still speak the same language: the compass, the square, the temple itself, a building that exists both in stone and in the soul. Scotland becomes their sanctuary not only because it shelters their bodies, but because it preserves their myth. It is a land that understands ghosts, a place where history and legend walk side by side in the fog. Imagine standing on the cliffs near Rosslyn at dusk. The wind howls through the heather. The chapel below glows in candlelight, its windows throwing small suns onto the dark valley. Inside, a single monk moves among the pews, his robes heavy, his steps slow. He kneels before the altar, touches the cold stone, and whispers the old words, Non nobis Domini. The sound echoes through the crypt, soft as a heartbeat. Perhaps it is just memory. Perhaps it is something older, something that refuses to die. Because if the treasure of the temple was ever more than gold, if it was knowledge, a way of seeing, then it could never truly be buried. It would flow through the blood of those who remembered, through craft and symbol and prayer, until one day it no longer needed to hide. And maybe that was the Templars' final victory, to survive not as a name, but as an idea. The fires of Paris could not burn it. The sea could not drown it. The years could not erase it. The order is gone, yes, but its architecture remains. Stone and silence. Symbol and code. A chapel on a hill, a carving of a chalice, a cross half worn by weather, each one a doorway, if you know how to look. And when the night grows quiet in Scotland, when the fog rolls down the glen and the wind stills for just a breath, some say you can hear hooves on distant stone, the echo of riders long gone, making their final patrol through time itself. They ride not for battle, but for memory. And somewhere in the darkness, where the mist touches the sea, a voice older than any king murmurs again the vow that began it all. Poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the temple. The words fade, swallowed by rain. But the vow endures. The brotherhood still breathes, not in fortress or throne, but in the heart of every story that refuses to end. The rain that fell on Rosslyn stones thins into mist, then into the faint, sweet scent of sawdust and mortar. The sound of chanting fades. The clink of chisels takes its place. Time has shifted again, imperceptibly, as though you've simply walked out of one shadow into another. The medieval crosses soften into compasses and squares, and the white mantles of knights blur into the aprons of craftsmen. The temple still stands, but now it's being rebuilt, this time in secret, this time within the minds of men. No one can say exactly when the last of the Templars became the first of the Freemasons. The line between them isn't written in any charter, only traced in the way symbols survived: the cross that turned into a compass, the sword into a trowel, the chapel into the lodge. For centuries, Scotland guarded them both. The exiled knights and the guilds of stonemasons who built cathedrals for kings they didn't quite serve. When the fires of persecution cooled, what remained was a fraternity of builders, men who carved not only in stone but in meaning. They spoke of geometry as divine language, of architecture as prayer. Theirs was a brotherhood that valued secrecy, discipline, and initiation, echoes of a rule that once governed a holy order. And if you listen closely to the words spoken in their early rituals, you can still hear the ghosts of the temple whispering beneath them. Picture a candlelit chamber, its walls hung with cloth to mute the sound. At the center, a checkerboard floor, light and dark, heaven and earth, truth and silence. A man stands blindfolded before an altar. Around him, voices recite oaths in measured tones, the rhythm older than memory. He swears not to reveal the secrets he is about to learn. He places his hand on a volume of law, or scripture, or both, it depends on the century, and he promises to build not just with stone, but with virtue. When the blindfold lifts, he sees symbols carved into the walls: the square, the compass, the blazing star. And there, half hidden in the pattern, something older, a red cross. The ritual belongs to the Freemasons, of course, but the echo belongs to the Templars. By the 17th century, Europe had forgotten the order's sins but not its legend. Scholars spoke of them as martyrs. Mystics claimed descent from them. The idea of the Templar, a warrior of God, guardian of hidden truth, had become irresistible. The new brotherhood of builders began to adopt their myths like heirlooms. Not out of theft, but recognition. Both had worshipped at the altar of geometry. Both had found divinity in design. For the Templars, architecture was fortress and faith. For the Masons, it was the map of the universe. In their lodges, symbols multiplied. The Temple of Solomon became the central metaphor, the lost perfection of divine order, the blueprint of the world rebuilt through human hands. And who better to have preserved that blueprint than the men who had once lived upon its ruins? The Masons said little about it directly. They preferred allegory to history, symbols to names. But the resemblance was there, plain as stone. Their rituals invoked a lost temple, their structure mirrored a knightly hierarchy, their passwords and grips suggested a lineage of secrecy that stretched back beyond any cathedral. Perhaps it was all coincidence. Or perhaps memory finds ways of surviving even when the body that holds it is gone. In Scotland, where both traditions had entwined for centuries, the connection was clearest. The earliest Masonic documents, the Shaw Statutes of the 1590s, the old charges that followed, speak of moral codes, of brotherhood, of guarding the mysteries of the craft. Yet in the margins of some copies, a curious phrase appears: the Brethren of the Temple. By the 18th century, those words bloom into full mythology. Lodges across Europe begin forming, Templar branches, orders within orders, claiming to preserve the chivalric heritage of the original knights. They wear white mantles marked with red crosses. They use swords in their ceremonies. They speak of recovering the lost word, the secret name of God said to have been inscribed within Solomon's temple. And though historians insist this is romantic invention, the effect is undeniable. The Templars, dead for 500 years, have returned, not as soldiers, but as symbols. The Freemasons call it allegory, but in the candlelight of their meetings, allegory feels like resurrection. You can almost see it, the Grand Master of a lodge in Edinburgh standing before his brethren, reciting the legend of Hiram Abiff, the master builder slain for guarding the temple's secrets. The story ends not with revenge, but with rebirth, the builder's wisdom preserved through ritual, passed down in silence. Change the names, and it could be Jacques de Molay speaking from the flames. The parallels grow deeper. Both orders revere the compass, the circle drawn by steady hand, symbol of creation and eternity. Both measure the world through number and proportion. Both prize loyalty above all. And both believe that truth, once lost, can only be recovered by those willing to search in darkness. For the Masons, that search becomes moral and metaphysical. For the scattered Templars, it had been literal, the quest for relics, for divine knowledge buried in stone. Somewhere along the centuries, the two pursuits merge, indistinguishable. The Knight and the Mason meet in the middle, building not cathedrals, but mysteries. There are stories, soft-footed, never proven, that in certain lodges the oath of initiation ends with the same words once spoken beneath the red cross: Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord. And there are those who say that when a new Grand Master is elected, a relic is placed upon the altar, a small iron box, ancient, locked without a key. No one opens it. It serves as symbol and warning both, a reminder that not all secrets are meant for daylight. In France, in the century before Revolution, the Masonic lodges multiply like wildfire. Philosophers, nobles, artisans, all drawn by the promise of equality, of hidden wisdom. Within the lodges, they speak freely of liberty, of enlightenment, of building a new world. The Church calls it heresy all over again. History repeats itself, but this time the fire burns differently. The Templars died defending a temple of stone, the Freemasons lived to build a temple of ideas. Yet the red cross lingers in the corner of the blueprints. The geometry of faith still hums beneath the geometry of architecture. The line between myth and inheritance blurs completely. In Germany, a secret order calls itself the Strict Observance, claiming to be the direct continuation of the Templars, governed by unknown superiors, who guard the last relics of the temple. In France, the Chevaliers de la Rose-Croix mix Templar legend with alchemy and mysticism, searching for the lost word in the stars. Even across the Atlantic, when Masonic lodges rise in the New World, their founders bring the same myths with them. On currency, on architecture, on the symbols of nations, the marks of the temple echo faintly: the all-seeing eye, the unfinished pyramid, the Latin mottos of divine design. The dream of a sacred order reborn in secret has simply changed continents. Perhaps the treasure of the Templars was never in gold or relics, but in this: the endurance of their vision, faith as architecture, truth as something to be built, not owned. In that sense, the Masons are not impostors but inheritors. The Templars guarded the physical temple. The Freemasons guard the idea of it. And between those two pillars, stone and spirit, the bridge of history stands unbroken. Imagine the centuries like the arches of a great hall. At one end, 9 knights kneel in the dust of Jerusalem, swearing their vows. At the other, men in aprons raise their compasses toward the light, tracing the same divine geometry in the air. The space between them glows with symbols, crosses, squares, circles, overlapping like stained glass. The music changes, but the rhythm never stops. The light shifts, but the design remains. And if you stand in the middle of that hall long enough, you can almost hear the faint sound of tools striking stone, a voice reciting an oath, a whisper of prayer. "Build carefully," it says. "Every line leads back to the temple." The chant continues softly, spreading outward from lodge to chapel, from fortress to cathedral, until it fills the air itself. The Templars are gone. The Freemasons remain. But perhaps, in truth, they have always been the same story, one that began under the sun of Jerusalem and now continues beneath the stars of every age. And somewhere in that long, unbroken rhythm, between chisel and cross, between oath and silence, the red cross still glows faintly, carved into the foundation of the world. The sound of chisels fades. The scent of stone gives way to salt once more. The rhythm of hammers becomes the rhythm of waves. The geometry of the temple, those perfect circles, those sacred proportions, unfolds like a map across the sea, and the story follows it west. For centuries, the Red Cross had been hidden in lodges and chapels, carved into pillars and forgotten catacombs. But now the wind carries it over the Atlantic, to a place where myth and earth would one day meet. A place where treasure sleeps under sand and pine, and where the past seems to whisper through the soil. They call it Oak Island. A speck of land off the coast of Nova Scotia, hardly more than a wrinkle in the ocean, a crescent of trees and rock battered by storms. To the fishermen of Mahone Bay, it was always just another scrap of forest and gulls, a place to anchor in bad weather or cut timber. But one summer night in 1795, a boy named Daniel McGinnis saw something strange. He was rowing along the shore when the sun dipped low, setting the water on fire. Among the oaks, he noticed a clearing, and in that clearing, a depression in the ground. Above it, a block and tackle hung from an old oak branch, its rope frayed with age. It looked like the remnant of a pit that had once been dug, then abandoned. He came back the next day with friends and shovels. They dug through a foot of soil and found a layer of flagstones, not natural to the island. Beneath that, at 10 feet, a platform of oak logs. Then more earth. At 20 feet, another platform. Then again at 30. Each layer perfectly spaced, as if built with purpose. It was a pattern too deliberate to ignore, and too familiar to be mere coincidence. A shaft descending in measured intervals, timber over soil, soil over timber, like the crypts and vaults the Templars had built beneath their chapels. A vertical labyrinth. A hiding place meant not to reveal, but to protect. They called it the Money Pit. As word spread, men came from the mainland to help dig. They reached 90 feet before water flooded in from unseen channels, rising faster than they could pump it out. The pit filled as if the island itself were breathing. When they tried to drain it, the sea poured back. It was as if the earth was defending its secret. In the years that followed, generation after generation returned to Oak Island, engineers, miners, dreamers, and scholars, all chasing what they believed was buried below: gold, manuscripts, relics, the lost fortune of a forgotten brotherhood. Some said it was pirate treasure, Captain Kidd, perhaps, or Blackbeard, who swore he'd buried his wealth where none but Satan and I can find it. But the design of the pit, the craftsmanship, the precision, felt too ancient, too meticulous for pirates. Others saw the pattern and thought of the temple. The Templars, remember, were masters of construction, geometry, and concealment. Their vaults beneath Jerusalem had been feats of engineering centuries ahead of their time. Their hidden hoards vanished into earth and legend. And their fleet, those ships that sailed from La Rochelle, their holds heavy with unknown cargo, had never been found. If even one of them crossed the Atlantic, Oak Island lies almost exactly where the currents would have carried it. It sounds improbable. But history often hides an improbability. In the 1300s, the Norse were already crossing to Newfoundland. Sailors from Portugal and Scotland had whispered of western lands long before Columbus. And if any order in Europe had both the ships and the reason to vanish into the horizon, it was the Templars. There are traces, small, infuriating traces, that keep the theory alive. A carved stone once found on the island bore symbols resembling both Hebrew and medieval cipher, echoing the markings seen in Templar commanderies. A triangle of drilled stones on the shore forms an alignment that points directly to the Money Pit, mirroring the geometric codes found in Rosslyn Chapel. And beneath the island, explorers have recovered fragments of chain, parchment, and coconut fiber, materials alien to Nova Scotia, materials used in ancient waterproofing. Even stranger, early settlers found a cross carved into the rock on a neighboring island, an equal-armed cross, identical to that of the temple. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidences tend to multiply in the presence of myth. Imagine standing there now, centuries later. The night is cold and wet, the sea hissing against the shore. The trees creak like old ships in a storm. Beneath your feet lies the pit, sealed again after so many failed excavations. The air smells of iron and pine sap. You close your eyes, and you can almost hear the echo of tools below, the thud of mallets, the whisper of men chanting in Latin as they lower chests into the earth. They work quickly, silently. A torch guttering on the edge of the pit throws their shadows long across the clearing. When the last chest disappears into darkness, they cover it with oak beams and soil, one layer at a time, until the ground looks untouched. Then they erase their footprints and walk toward the waiting ships. The sea swallows them without a sound. And above the buried hoard, the oaks grow again, their roots threading through the centuries. Every generation since has come to Oak Island with the same fever, to uncover what others could not. They bring dynamite, drills, sonar, even faith itself. Some lose fortunes, others lives. The pit collapses more than once, claiming those who dig too deep. Each death becomes part of the legend, a toll exacted by the guardians of the secret. The more they search, the deeper the mystery grows. The tunnels flood, machines fail, maps contradict one another. And still, the promise endures, something waits below. Gold, relics, manuscripts, perhaps even the Ark itself. Or nothing at all, nothing but the reflection of human longing, the eternal hunger to believe that truth can be buried and found again. Yet there's a curious symmetry in it all. The Templars began by digging under the Temple Mount, seeking sacred knowledge. Centuries later, men dig under Oak Island, seeking theirs. Both pits, perhaps, lead to the same place, the heart of a mystery that refuses to end. some modern researchers trace the geometry of the island itself. They find that the money pit, the triangle of stones, and the carved cross align almost perfectly according to the ratios of sacred architecture used in medieval Europe, the same proportions used in Rosslyn, in Chartres, in Jerusalem. A hidden code written into the landscape. And in that geometry, they claim, lies a message that the treasure was never meant to be recovered, only rediscovered symbolically, each age digging its own pit in search of meaning. It's a poetic thought, but there's something chilling about it too. Because what if the greatest secret the Templars hid was not the relics of God, but the idea that truth must be hidden to be preserved? The money pit might be a mirror, reflecting not the past, but the endless human need to uncover, to possess, to prove. And yet, the sound of shovels still echoes every summer. The island still draws seekers. They stand where Daniel McGinnis once stood, peering into that same hollow in the ground, feeling that same pulse of wonder and fear. Every year, they dig a little deeper. And every year, the island holds its breath, and keeps its secret. The wind rises. The trees sway. Far offshore, the water glows faintly under the moon. You imagine a fleet sailing there centuries ago, its sails pale against the stars, its cargo heavy with history. One ship turns toward the coast, toward this very island, and lowers its anchor. Men row ashore. They carry torches and chests. They work through the night. By dawn, only the gulls remain, circling above a patch of disturbed earth. The island sleeps. The story waits. And across the centuries, the same question drifts on the wind. What did they bring here, and why did they hide it? The sea around Oak Island stills. The waves smooth out into glass, and the whisper of the Atlantic becomes the rustle of parchment. Maps fold into manuscripts, torches turn into the warm flicker of candlelight upon vellum, and the sound of digging gives way to the scratching of quills. The centuries exhale again. The Templars have slipped entirely from history, and into story. Once they were men, soldiers of Christ, bankers of kings, guardians of secrets. But now they are something else entirely. They have become an idea, unbound by time, immune to death. They move through pages and paintings, through rumor and revelation. Every age, every generation, rediscovers them, reshapes them, rewrites them in its own image. You see them first in the romances of the late Middle Ages, when Europe, still haunted by the smoke of their pyres, began to imagine what could not be proven. In those tales, the Templar is the eternal knight, betrayed, pure, and cursed. A figure of both faith and fire. Some stories make him a guardian of the Holy Grail, others, a sinner damned to wander forever until his order's honor is restored. The chroniclers could not bear to let them die, so they transformed them into myth. The earliest ballads speak of the white knights who ride beneath the moon, appearing at crossroads to guide lost travelers. In Catalonia, they're said to guard a cave where a golden chalice glows brighter each century. In Germany, poets write of der Grauritter, the Grail Knight, who kneels before a sacred cup that grants him eternal life but eternal solitude. And so the Templars, once flesh and blood, become shadows of holiness and hunger. As Europe changes, so does the legend. The Enlightenment tries to reason with it and fails. Secret societies adopt their symbols, philosophers borrow their mystique. Voltaire calls them martyrs of reason. Goethe makes them guardians of hidden wisdom. Even as faith wanes, fascination grows. By the 18th century, the Templars walk again, not on battlefields, but in the candlelit lodges of Freemasonry, where the Red Cross gleams on aprons and rings. They are invoked as the keepers of the old mysteries, the link between the spiritual and the scientific, the divine and the human. And yet, in the same breath, another story takes root, one of conspiracy. The idea that the Templars did not die, that they simply went underground, becomes too irresistible to ignore. Historians try to bury them under facts, but rumor has its own kind of immortality. By the 19th century, The order is everywhere, in penny novels and Gothic tales, in the whispered rites of occult societies, in the designs of secret tombs and cathedrals. Painters dress them in white and red again, their faces hidden beneath shadowed hoods. Poets call them angels of the sword, sons of fire, keepers of the forbidden light. They have become symbols of everything humanity both craves and fears: faith unshaken, power unaccountable, knowledge untouchable. When the Romantic era arrives, it carries them like a banner. The world, weary of reason, begins to crave mystery again, and the Templars provide it in abundance. In novels, they are both saints and villains. Sir Walter Scott resurrects them in Ivanhoe as tragic zealots. Sir Brian de Boisgobert, the warrior torn between lust and salvation, a man so devoted to the ideal of purity that he destroys himself chasing it. The character is fictional, but the echo is real, a mirror of a history that still smolders beneath the surface. In France, poets and mystics cast them as the architects of cathedrals, the secret custodians of alchemy and sacred geometry. In Germany, Wagner gives them music. His Parsifal turns the Grail Knights into spiritual heirs of the Temple, their quest an endless circle of redemption and loss. Even as the real order lies centuries in dust, their shadows stride across canvas and stage. They are the last paladins of faith in a disenchanted world. And so, once more, they are resurrected, this time not by God, but by imagination. The 20th century finds new uses for their ghosts. Scholars dig through archives, uncovering scraps of truth among centuries of rumor, while filmmakers and novelists fill in the blanks with adventure and conspiracy. Now the Templars guard not relics, but riddles. They hide maps to divine bloodlines, codes within cathedrals, keys to immortality. They are no longer knights. They are myth itself, dressed in armor of mystery. In the pulp magazines of the early century, they become the precursors of secret orders pulling the strings of history. By mid-century, they haunt academic tomes, Dan Brown's ancestors, readying the ground for a new faith in hidden knowledge. By the time Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Da Vinci Code arrive, the legend has mutated again. The Templars are no longer victims but visionaries, custodians of truths too dangerous for church or crown. The Grail is no longer a cup but a secret lineage, the Ark a symbol of knowledge itself. The treasure they guard is no longer metal or relic, but the story of humanity's divine spark. It's fascinating how the legend always changes shape to fit the hunger of its age. To the Crusaders, the Templars were holy warriors. To kings, they were bankers and heretics. To mystics, they were alchemists. To modern minds, they are keepers of code and conspiracy. The only constant is the awe they inspire. Walk into any museum today and you'll find their mark: a sword engraved with a cross, a seal showing two riders on one horse, a fragment of parchment signed by a grand master. The relics are mute, yet they hum with that strange electricity of something unfinished. Historians can catalogue every fact, dates, battles, papal bulls, but still the myth lives louder. Because what the Templars left behind wasn't a story with an ending, it was a riddle with no answer. And humanity loves riddles more than resolutions. So we keep rewriting them. In the libraries of Paris, scholars trace their signatures on charters. In the deserts of Jerusalem, archaeologists dig through the same dust the first knights once disturbed. In the digital age, the Red Cross flickers across computer screens, reborn as symbols in games and films, sometimes heroes, sometimes villains, always immortal. The name alone has gravity. Whisper Templar, and it carries the weight of centuries: faith, betrayal, treasure, flame. It's a word that feels older than language, heavier than proof. Imagine the myth as a cathedral, built stone by story, tower by retelling. Every writer lays a new block. Every artist carves another face into its walls. It rises higher with each generation, until it almost seems to touch heaven. And beneath it, somewhere deep in the crypt of all these stories, the real Templars lie in silence, watching, perhaps smiling faintly, as the world still kneels before their shadows. Because myths, like temples, are built for worship. And worship, once begun, never really ends. Sometimes, late at night, you can still hear their names carried on the wind. Not in battle cries now, but in the murmurs of readers turning pages, in the projector's hum, in the soft click of a researcher's pen. Every time we say their name, every time we dream of hidden treasure, of secret knowledge, of the promise that something greater waits just beyond understanding, we keep them alive. They are the ghosts of our curiosity, the knights of our imagination. And though their swords have long turned to rust, their legend remains sharper than ever, cutting across time, carving its emblem into every mind that dares to wonder. What if they were right? What if they still guard something? The question is enough. That's what the Templars always understood. The ink on the page glows faintly in the candlelight. The sound of the sea is distant again, the horizon calling. The legends have crossed continents, slipped through centuries, and now their reflection shimmers on the surface of the modern world. But we are not done yet. There is still one question left, the one history cannot answer and fiction refuses to let die. The Templars have become myth, yes. But behind every myth, there is a fragment of truth. And so we turn the page again, letting the echo lead us into the silence between stories, where fact and faith collide. Because somewhere beyond legend, beneath all the fiction, the last secret still waits to be found. The candles of legend gutter and fade. The flicker of parchment becomes the pale gleam of morning light upon glass, museum glass, library glass, the cold, polished surface of modern reason. The rustle of pages turns into the quiet hum of an archive, the whir of climate control where centuries sleep behind locked doors. The ghosts withdraw, but they do not vanish. They hover in the air between fact and faith. The question has followed the Templars through time like a shadow that never lifts. Were they saints or sinners, guardians or deceivers, myth or truth? Every age has tried to answer, and every age has failed in its own fascinating way. Because the Templars do not yield to simple endings. They exist in the space between what can be proven and what we need to believe. Open the official records of their trials, those brittle pages preserved in the Vatican archives. The words are stark, unadorned, confessions extracted under torture, denials written in trembling hands, lists of relics, inventories of lands. There is no grail, no ark, no treasure, only men stripped of everything they had once sworn to protect. And yet, between those lines, there is something the documents cannot bury. When the inquisitors ask the same questions over and over. Did you renounce Christ? Did you worship an idol? Did you hide gold? The answers, though beaten into submission, all orbit the same void. It is as if the Templars were guarding not a thing, but a silence. A silence that feels heavier than stone. Historians call it secrecy born of military discipline, but secrecy is rarely so absolute unless it conceals belief itself. Step into a museum. A Templar sword rests under glass, its hilt worn smooth by a hand long gone. The placard beneath it lists its provenance, its weight, the alloy of its blade. Science explains everything except the feeling it gives you, the quiet hum of reverence, of unfinished story. That's where truth begins to blur. For every documented fact about the order, there is a rumor that refuses to die. The Vatican may have absolved them in 2007, releasing a forgotten parchment proving the Pope never truly condemned them, but absolution does not erase mystery. It only deepens it. The Church can clear their name, but not their legend. You stand now in the ruins of their commanderies across Europe, Tomar in Portugal, Leon in France, Temple Brewer in England. Stones covered in moss, arches opening to sky. The architecture speaks a language historians can translate. Romanesque, Gothic, pointed arch, ribbed vault, but the design hums with something older. Ratios and alignments that match celestial patterns, angles that trace the path of the sun. Coincidence, say the scholars? But the same geometry appears in Jerusalem, in Roslin, in the blueprints of cathedrals centuries apart. The same obsession with light, with number, with symmetry, the architecture of belief as proof of something eternal. It is possible, perhaps, that the Templars never possessed holy relics at all, but that they found instead the equation that binds faith to form. A way to make heaven measurable. To the medieval mind, that would have been more dangerous than any grail. What, then, is the truth? That they were the first bankers of Europe? Undeniably. That they fought bravely and died unjustly? Without question. That they guarded relics? Maybe. That they discovered something beneath the Temple Mount that changed them forever? History cannot say. But if you look closely, the clues stretch like a constellation across the centuries. Their emblem, two knights on one horse, spoke of poverty, but also of duality. Their very motto, Non nobis domini, was a declaration and a warning, not for us. They built their churches in circles, modeled after the Holy Sepulchre, structures that symbolized eternity rather than hierarchy. They defied the feudal system by answering only to God and the Pope, and that independence was their undoing. And when they were destroyed, their wealth vanished not by chance, but by design. That kind of disappearance feels deliberate, as if orchestrated by men who understood that sometimes survival means vanishing from the map of history altogether. Maybe that's the real answer. The Templars are both myth and truth, because they made themselves so. They turned secrecy into sanctity, silence into scripture. They hid their treasures not in vaults, but in symbols so pervasive that the world would forget they were looking at them. The Grail, the Cross, the Compass, the Temple, all pieces of a story we keep rebuilding without realizing we're inside it. Perhaps that's why the legend persists, because it was meant to. Because the Templars knew that ideas cannot be burned. Walk the streets of modern Jerusalem. The sun still blinds against the stone. Pilgrims still pray where faith began. Somewhere beneath your feet, the tunnels of the Temple Mount still breathe their dust into the air. Archaeologists dig, careful, reverent, their flashlights sweeping the same stones those 9 knights once touched. Every discovery, each shard, each carving, feels like an echo. One day, perhaps, someone will find the chamber where it all began. But will they find gold, or only the reflection of their own longing? Because the treasure we imagine beneath those stones says more about us than it ever did about them. In Paris, tourists stand on the square where Jacques de Molay was burned. A small plaque marks the spot. They read it, take photographs, move on. Few know that beneath that same square, in the hidden levels of the city, sealed tunnels still stretch toward the old temple quarter. Every now and then, workmen claim to hear noises below, a metallic echo, a shifting of stone. Superstition, of course. But superstition is just myth spoken softly enough to pass for memory. The bells of Notre Dame ring nearby, and for a heartbeat, the smoke of 1314 seems to rise again. The Grand Master's last words still cling to the air. God knows who has wronged us, and he will summon them to his judgment. Within the year, both Pope and King were dead. Coincidence, says history. Justice, says the legend. The Templars have become mirrors for every generation's faith and doubt. For the devout, they are martyrs. For the skeptic, conspirators. For the dreamer, keepers of the eternal secret, that somewhere, holiness and knowledge meet. But maybe their greatest secret was never what they found. Maybe it was what they understood. That mystery itself is sacred. That truth, to survive, must sometimes wear the mask of myth. And that faith, once questioned, becomes stronger than faith untested. So what remains, after all the fire and gold and legend? A few words in stone. A handful of symbols. A silence that still hums under the world like a buried bell. Listen closely, and you might hear it. Not the clash of swords or the crackle of flame, but a softer sound, the pulse of history refusing to end. The same rhythm that carried them from Jerusalem to Paris, from Rosslyn to Oak Island, from the Grail to the printed page. A heartbeat, steady and calm, repeating one truth that even myth cannot distort. They lived. They believed. They fell. And yet, they endure. The sun climbs higher, glinting off the Seine, off the stones of the old temple quarter, off the spire of Notre Dame. The light feels ancient. For a moment, you could almost swear it's reflecting off armor. But no. It's just morning in the modern world. The knights are gone. Only their story remains, woven into every prayer for knowledge, every dream of hidden wisdom, every quiet belief that something sacred still lies beneath the surface of things. That belief is the treasure. And maybe that was their plan all along. The sunlight that glints on the Seine softens, blurs, and fades once more into gold, the same gold that once shimmered on the shields of knights, the same glow that flickered across parchment, and relics and flame. The centuries begin to fold in on themselves, quietly, like pages closing. Yet the story does not end. Some stories never do. You can almost hear it again, that low hum beneath the world, the echo that began in the vaults under Jerusalem and has never stopped. It moves beneath cathedrals and seas, beneath cities and myths, beneath every question humanity has ever asked of the divine. It is the sound of the Templars' secret, not the treasure, not the relics, not even the truth. It is the sound of endurance, the secret that never dies. Look back, just for a moment. See how the trail winds behind us. A handful of knights, poor and pure, kneeling in the dust of the Holy Land. Their swords are notched, their vows still wet upon their lips. Above them rises the Temple Mount, glowing in the first light of dawn. They swear to protect pilgrims. They swear poverty, chastity, obedience. They cannot yet know that their oaths will outlive them. Centuries pass. Gold piles high, vaults fill, ships vanish, kings burn them, myths resurrect them. The world changes its faith, its borders, its language, but the Templars never quite leave. Their mark remains, a cross carved into stone, a line of numbers hidden in a blueprint, a legend whispered by men who have never seen a sword. If you trace that line carefully enough, it points not to a horde, but to an idea, that truth, once sought, cannot be forgotten. There is a legend, perhaps only a story told by monks to fill long nights, that when Jacques de Molay died on the pyre, his ashes scattered on the river wind and drifted east. They say they traveled across the sea, across deserts and mountains, until they reached Jerusalem again. There, in the ruins beneath the temple, the ashes fell to rest upon the same stone where the order had been born. No proof, of course. But the image lingers, the beginning and end join like a circle. It feels right. Because that was always the Templars' truest language, circle and cross, beginning and end, heaven and earth touching at a single point. They built it into their chapels, into their maps, into the very way they prayed. The world itself was their cathedral, and their story its stained glass. Today, that glass is fractured. Pieces lie everywhere: Jerusalem, Paris, Scotland, Oak Island. Scholars pick up the fragments, polish them, hold them to the light. Each piece shows a different color: faith, greed, devotion, rebellion. No single pane gives the full image, but when you hold them together, you glimpse the outline of something vast. Not an order. Not a conspiracy. A question. What if everything sacred must one day be hidden to be preserved? It is a strange sort of faith, the faith of the unseen. And yet it's one humanity keeps rebuilding, age after age. Every temple is eventually destroyed, every treasure eventually lost. But the longing to seek them, that is eternal. In that sense, the Templars did not fail. They became exactly what they were meant to be, keepers of the search itself. When their fortresses fell, they left the world a blueprint for wonder. A reminder that faith without mystery becomes tyranny, and mystery without faith becomes madness. Between those two extremes lies the narrow path they walked, the path of the pilgrim knight, the one who fights not to conquer, but to understand. It's why their story still haunts us. not because we want their gold, but because we want what they wanted, to stand at the edge of the known world and believe there is still something worth searching for. Somewhere, beneath the noise of our modern world, that echo still moves. In every scientist who digs through the earth for the first spark of civilization. In every explorer who risks the sea for the sake of a question. In every writer who sits by candlelight trying to resurrect a forgotten truth. Each of them is a kind of Templar, poor in certainty, rich in wonder, sworn to chase a light that can never be fully possessed. That's the treasure now. Imagine walking one last time through the ruins of their temple. The walls are gone, the roof collapsed, but the air still hums with something ancient. A shaft of sunlight falls across the stone floor, lighting up a single carving, the cross, equal-armed, simple and perfect. The shadow it casts stretches toward the door, like a compass pointing west. You step closer. Dust stirs beneath your feet. For a heartbeat, you think you hear footsteps beside you, the soft tread of boots on stone, the faint clink of mail. Then silence. Only the wind. You kneel and touch the carved cross. The stone is cold, but beneath it, you can feel warmth, as if the world itself remembers. Everywhere they went, the Templars left behind traces of geometry, of faith turned into form. You see it now, all around you, the rose window, the spiral staircase, the hidden vault. You realize that these were never meant to hide treasure. They were meant to teach it. To build is to believe. To seek is to serve. To keep a secret is to honor it. That is the legacy they left behind. The world has changed beyond recognition. The Crusades are history, the swords are rust, the fortresses museums. Yet their story endures because it speaks to something timeless in us. The need to find meaning, to give our brief lives a shape as precise as the architecture of heaven. The Templars built with that in mind. And even when their walls fell, their design remained. Every question we ask about them, where is the treasure? What did they find? Why did they fall? Becomes part of their unfinished cathedral. Perhaps that's the real temple now, a structure made of questions instead of stone, built by everyone who still wonders. The last light fades. The cross on the floor dims. But as the shadows gather, they do not feel like an ending. In the darkness, you can still hear the heartbeat of history, slow and steady. The same rhythm that carried the knights across the sea, that rang in the bells of Paris, that hummed through the tunnels beneath the mount. It is the pulse of an idea too stubborn to die. The treasure is gone. The relics are gone. The names are half forgotten. But the secret, the one that began in the dust of Jerusalem, the one whispered from brother to brother through centuries, remains. It is this, that faith, knowledge, and courage are one and the same when born of wonder. And that no flame, no crown, no passage of time can destroy the desire to seek what lies beyond the visible. The wind rises. Dust swirls. Somewhere, perhaps in your imagination, perhaps not, you hear the faint echo of hooves retreating into the horizon. The red cross fades into the dusk, but it leaves behind a glow, small, steady, like a candle cupped against the dark. It is the light of the Templars' secret, the one they carried across continents and centuries. It is the light that outlives empires. And if you listen, truly listen, you'll hear it whisper what every knight once knew before dawn and death alike. Nothing is lost that was ever built in faith. And so, as the night settles once more across history's ruins, we leave them where they have always belonged, not in the vaults of kings, nor in the fantasies of treasure hunters, but in the quiet place between memory and myth. There, beneath the weight of time and the silence of the stars, the Templars still keep watch, guarding not gold, not relics, but the secret that outlasted all others. The secret that never dies.